While I was at work, my parents emptied my kids' rooms. They dragged every toy, every book, every blanket down to the basement. When I walked in, my son's face was red from crying, my daughter clutching her teddy like a refugee in her own house. And my parents, they just looked at me and said, "Our other grandson deserves the best rooms." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I smiled, knelt beside my kids, and whispered, "Pack your bags." Because in that moment, I already knew this wasn't just about bedrooms. It was about everything they had taken from me my whole life, and they had no idea what was coming. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I can still feel the air in that hallway, thick, stale, almost suffocating, as if the house itself knew what had just happened. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old carpet, but underneath there was something rancid, the scent of dismissal, of being erased. Noah's small fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Lily's tiny body shook in silence, her teddy bear pressed so hard against her chest I thought the seams might tear. My children didn't need words to tell me how deeply they had been wounded. Their bodies spoke for them. And above them, at the top of the stairs, stood my parents, cold, unyielding, and certain of their righteousness. My mother's voice was sharp, almost casual. "Don't look at us like that, Emily. You know it's only fair. Brian's boy is growing. He deserves space. The basement is good enough for yours." Good enough. I don't think she realized how those two words landed. Maybe she never cared. Good enough had been my category my entire life. I dropped my work bag by the door. The strap slipped from my shoulder and hit the floor with a dull thud, but no one reacted. My father didn't even lower his newspaper. He sat in his recliner like a king in his court, spectacles perched on his nose, voice low and dismissive. "It's settled, Emily. Don't make a scene. You always overreact." Those words, "don't make a scene," were a script I had been given since childhood. When Brian wrecked Dad's car at 17 and I was blamed for not watching him, "don't make a scene." When Brian failed out of college and they raided the money jar I'd saved from part-time jobs to pay his tuition bills, "don't make a scene." When I brought home straight A's, they didn't even look up from the dinner table. Brian brought home a participation ribbon and they framed it on the wall. "Don't make a scene." But standing there, staring at my children's belongings piled in the damp basement like garbage, I realized the scene had already been made. I was just the one who had finally decided to stop pretending it wasn't happening. I walked past my parents without a word and led the kids into the kitchen. My shoes clicked against the hardwood, echoing too loudly in the silence. The kitchen smelled of leftover roast, but it tasted bitter in my mouth. I pulled 2 glasses from the cabinet, filled them with water, and slid them across the table to Noah and Lily. Their hands trembled as they reached for them. I forced my voice steady, even warm. "Drink. You'll feel better." Lily's lips quivered around the rim of her glass. Noah's voice came out cracked. "Mom, why do they hate us?" The questions sliced through me. 10 years old, and already he could see the truth I had spent decades denying. "They don't hate you," I said carefully. "They just don't understand love the way they should." It was a half-truth. The real truth was too heavy for a child to carry. My mother's footsteps clicked into the kitchen. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a smug tilt to her chin. "You're being dramatic again, Emily. Always so sensitive. It's just bedrooms. They'll adjust." I turned to her, my voice calm, almost too calm. "Children should never have to adjust to being treated like they don't matter." Her lips pursed, but she didn't reply. Silence hung between us like smoke. My father's voice floated in from the living room. "Dry detached Brian's boy is the legacy of this family. Don't forget that." I laughed quietly, a hollow laugh that made them both blink. Legacy. If legacy means crushing one child to crown another, then maybe it's not worth preserving. I guided Noah and Lily upstairs to their stripped rooms. The sight was worse than I'd imagined: bare walls, where posters once hung, empty bookshelves, with dust outlines where their favorite stories used to rest, beds stripped of covers, as if joy itself had been peeled away. I ran my hand over the wooden frame of Lily's bed. I remembered late nights reading fairy tales to her giggles muffled beneath the blanket. Now the room looked like it belonged to strangers. Noah stood in his doorway, fists still clenched. It's like we don't even exist here anymore. I knelt beside him, met his eyes. We do exist, and we're going to find a place where you never have to doubt that again. He blinked back tears and nodded. For the first time that evening, I saw a glimmer of relief in his eyes. Back downstairs, my father rustled his newspaper again, muttering to my mother, "She'll calm down. She always does." That was when I knew they truly had no idea. They didn't see the shift in me. They thought this was just another storm to wait out. They had no clue this was the last storm I would ever weather under their roof. I pulled out the kids' school backpacks still lying by the stairs. The zippers screeched as I stuffed in pajamas, toothbrushes, whatever I could grab quickly. The sound cut through the silence like an alarm bell. My mother flinched at the noise, but I didn't look up. "Are you seriously leaving?" she demanded. "Yes," I answered simply. "You'll regret it," she snapped. "Don't think we'll be here when you come crawling back." I turned my head just enough to meet her eyes. My voice was steady cold. I wouldn't dream of it. We stepped out into the night air. It was cool, crisp, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and damp earth. For the first time in years, it felt like I could breathe. The kids climbed into the back seat of our beat-up Honda, their bags clutched like shields. I started the engine, the low hum filling the silence that had weighed so heavily inside the house. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught one last glimpse of my parents in the doorway, silhouettes framed in the warm glow of the house. A house that had never really been home. I didn't look back again. The road stretched ahead long and uncertain, but it was ours. The yellow lines blurred beneath the headlights as Noah leaned his head against the window and Lily's small hand reached for mine between the seats. We drove in silence for a while. The hum of the car, the soft rhythm of their breathing, the world outside slipping into darkness, it all wrapped around me like a strange, fragile cocoon. "Where are we going, Mom?" Noah finally asked. I squeezed his hand. Somewhere better. Somewhere that feels like home. And for the first time that night, I believed it. The truth is, leaving that house wasn't just about bedrooms. It wasn't even just about Noah and Lily. It was about a lifetime of being told I wasn't enough. Of was measured against Brian and always found lacking. Of carrying silence like a cross on my back because making a scene was forbidden. But I had decided in that moment, standing in front of my children's stripped rooms, the cycle ends here. And though my parents thought they had won again, they were wrong. Because this time, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. This time I had a plan, and they had no idea what was coming. The motel key was heavier than it looked. It slid across the laminate counter with a small clink that sounded louder than it should in the fluorescent light. The woman at the desk, gray sweatshirt, tired eyes, kind mouth, didn't ask questions when she saw Noah's puffy face or Lily asleep on my shoulder, thumb pressed against her cheek like she'd forgotten how to let go. She just handed me 2 extra packets of hot chocolate and said ice machines down the hall. Vending's out of the Snickers, but there's pretzels. The way she spoke, gentle and practical, made my throat sting. I nodded like I was fine, like this was normal. Like I checked into motels on school nights all the time with 2 kids in pajamas and a bank account I didn't want to open on my phone because numbers can be cruel. In the room, the AC hummed a low, steady note that felt like someone holding a hand over my heart to quiet it. The carpet was clean enough. The beds were too soft. The kind of soft that swallows you whole if you're not careful. Noah sat on the edge of one bed and kicked his shoes off with a sigh older than 10. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. "No," I said, tucking Lily in. "We're in a choice." He leaned back and stared at the stippled ceiling. "It smells like the nurse's office," he said, and I almost laughed. It did, bleach and lemon and old ductwork, like someone had tried to erase what came before and wasn't fully successful. I made the hot chocolate in paper cups and blew across the surface so Lily wouldn't burn her tongue if she woke up and wanted a sip. The steam pinned me to a memory so fast, my stomach dropped a different kitchen, a different steam rising me, standing on a stool stirring cocoa, because Brian had sniffed and said, "Not too much powder, Em. I like it rich," and my mother had said, "Do it the way your brother likes. Don't make a scene." We were 7 and 11 then. He had just won a team spirit ribbon at Little League, and there was a cake from the grocery store with blue icing that dyed our teeth. My spelling bee certificate sat under the floral magnet on the fridge, and everyone forgot to sign it. "Good enough," my mother had said when I held it up after dinner. "Put it away. Good enough." Two words that can look harmless if you squint, if you want to be the kind of person who believes the best. Two words that built a scaffolding in my life and then pulled away the ladder. When I was 9, my birthday fell on a Saturday, and I asked for a book about oceans. I loved the part in science class where Ms. Taylor talked about currents and tides, and how the moon could tug whole bodies of water the way a mother tugs blankets over a sleeping child. Nerdy Brian had said loud enough for it to count as a performance. My present ended up being a plastic charm bracelet from the pharmacy and a used copy of a book about the Civil War that Dad had found at a yard sale. "Smart girls read history," he said, meaning someone else's history. Brian's party came the next day. 2-layer cake balloons, cousins a backyard that flared alive. He got a new glove, a jersey with his name patched across the back, and a framed photo of him rounding first base, with his mouth open in a perfect O of triumph. The frame went on the mantel. The mantel faced the front door. "Don't make a scene," Mom whispered when I cried about the unequal candles. "You're being dramatic." I learned early that certain words were code. Dramatic meant inconvenient. Sensitive meant disobedient. Legacy meant Brian. It wasn't that my parents said he mattered and I didn't, not directly. They were too polished for that. They said the things that sounded reasonable if you took them out of context and rinsed them free of history. He needs more space for his interests. He's the boy. He'll carry the name. You're more independent. You don't mind. Girls are adaptable. Don't make a scene. At 12, I lost my bedroom to his drum set. My father had bartered some weekend carpentry to a neighbor for a second-hand kit, red shells, scuffed cymbals, and dragged them upstairs like a trove. "We'll put your things in the attic for a while," my mother said breezily, her hand already on my lamp. I climbed the narrow attic stairs with boxes stacked against my chin and told myself it was temporary. That word works like Novocaine when you're a child. It numbs the part of your brain that wants to scream. They left the attic window cracked for fresh air. In winter, wind slid under the blanket I used as a curtain and traced fingers along my spine, while Brian pounded downstairs and my parents shouted up, "Isn't this exciting? Your brother's found his passion." I got used to the lean of that ceiling. I learned the angles where you didn't hit your head. I learned how to sleep through noise. They praised me for being unbothered by the cold and the racket, as if adaptability were a prize I should be thankful to receive. "You've always been so mature," Mom said. "Good for you." The summer I was 16, I got a job at the pool snack bar. I loved the predictability of it, loved how quarters stacked like bright moons, how the order slips clipped to the line with clothespins looked like it meant something about me, that was easy to understand, that I could show up, count change, smile even when grown men snuck extra nacho cheese, and pretended they were doing me a favor by paying correct. It was the first time in my life where a ledger closed, and I could see what I had done with my own hands, where thank you meant thank you, and not sorry you way. I saved for a used laptop. I saved for gas to drive to campus tours. I saved for a duvet that I had clipped from a magazine and taped inside the closet door a small, silly altar to leaving. When my acceptance letter came, white envelope, blue crest, the word, "Congratulations, dancing." I held it under the kitchen light like it might evaporate in the sun. My parents smiled, but it was the small smile people use at church when someone they dislike sings a hymn a little too loud. "State school's fine," my father said. "You'll commute, save rent." They offered me a dorm scholarship, I said. "It's only partial, but if we use the college fund Grandma set up." The room went quiet, and in the quiet, the refrigerator hummed, and my own heart added the percussion. There is no fund, my mother said lightly, rinsing a dish like the conversation was a piece of food to be swirled down the drain. Your grandmother talked a lot. She didn't follow through. Don't make a scene about money. It's tacky. I believed her because that's what daughters do when history has taught them to trust certain voices, even when their bodies tighten like fists. I commuted. I worked double shifts. I took the bus when my car broke down, and Brian borrowed it anyway because he had places to be. He majored in figuring things out, which meant living at home and working on music and occasionally lifting weights. On nights when I came home late, he'd be sprawled across the couch, a halo of chip crumbs, and a movie paused on a still frame of racing cars. Turn the light off, he'd mutter, hand over his face, like I was the bright thing that hurt. When I brought home A's, my father said, "Good enough," and pushed the mail toward me, a stack of envelopes with my name on them, and a credit card offer that I would later understand was bait. When Brian landed a local gig at a bar, there was a dinner, a toast, a proud speech about legacy and risk-taking. "You're so brave," my mother said, squeezing his arm. The night I got inducted into the education honorary, I changed into my dress in the campus bathroom stall because I couldn't go home and back in time, and I took a picture of my certificate by myself in the mirror. The overhead light flickered. There's a way your face looks when you're trying very hard not to know what you know. I married young because I thought being seen was the antidote to being overlooked. I married Jason because he held doors and said things like, "You deserve to be heard," and because on the night he came with me to a family dinner, he looked around the table while Brian held court and whispered, "How do you stand it?" And I mistook witness for safety. We had Noah and then Lily, and I thought the sheer biology of it, me, a mother, would change the math that had never favored me. It did briefly. Babies make people softer, and my mother cooed and pressed their feet, and took 1,000 pictures as if volume could stand in for love. When Jason left, he said he needed quiet. He said I asked too much. He said a lot of things in a measured voice that sounded like a guidance counselor reading a pamphlet. I came home the way injured animals do to the place that had always called itself shelter, even when it was weather. Temporarily, my mother said, arms open, lips pursed with concern that smelled faintly of victory. "It'll be good for the kids to have stability." Stability had rules. Quiet hours that aligned with Brian's sleep schedule. Chores that aligned with my work schedule. Space that aligned with the fact that he still occupied the upstairs rooms with his gear, because at 30, he was finally getting traction, and I was at fault for making a living wage. "You're good at adjusting," Dad reminded me when I suggested maybe Noah could have the West room with the real light in the afternoons. "Don't make a scene. Brian needs it." There were good days. I don't want to make it sound like there weren't, because that would be unfair to the moments that kept me breathing. Noah, with a library book open on his knees and a pencil tucked behind his ear, was pretending to grade the characters like they were students. Lily was singing to her stuffed animals in a whisper, because I told her the basement walls carried sound differently, and we had to be considerate. Sunday mornings when I made pancakes and the kids decided how many chocolate chips they wanted, and I didn't measure, just poured until their faces sparkled. The way the backyard looked at dusk, a flat blue that made silhouettes of us, and for 3 minutes I could pretend the house behind me was a house in a picture where everyone inside had the same amount of light. But the pattern had teeth, and it bit so regularly, I stopped checking for blood. 2 summers ago, my Aunt June pulled me onto her porch and pressed a glass of sweet tea into my hand like it was a prescription. She was my mother's older sister, the family's designated truth-teller, who had learned to stop telling it out loud because truth is expensive. "Your grandmother set aside money for the first grandchild's education," she said without preamble, stirring her tea until ice clinked like tiny bells. "She wrote it down. I saw the ledger. She wanted you to have options, but she didn't." My stomach dropped in that way it does when an elevator moves faster than you expect. Mom said the fund never existed. June's mouth did that thing where people decide whether to be kind or accurate. Your mother redistributed things. Brian needed a car, she said simply, and in the space between the words I could see the moment my grandmother's neat cursive had become numbers in another column. I had to sit down. I hadn't eaten that morning because Lily had been sick, and I'd been busy wiping a face and packing a snack and trying to run on coffee and air. Why didn't anyone tell me, I asked, and the question sat there bare and ugly, like something that had just been born and wasn't ready for this world. Because they knew you'd make a scene, June said with a softness that almost broke me. And because you are the kind of person who thinks she can outrun unfairness if she works hard enough. Baby, you can't outrun a ledger you never saw. I went home and stared at the attic ceiling and counted backward to every time in my life when I'd swallowed bile and called it gratitude. I didn't make a scene. I made dinner. I folded laundry. I read to my kids. And I added the quiet weight of that truth to the stack that had already been built onto my spine. Brian came by later to borrow a ladder. "You're a saint," he said, as he carried it out the door without waiting for me to say yes. And I understood in that moment that to some people, a saint is just another word for a servant they don't have to pay. A month after that, my mother asked for the kids' birth certificates to set up something for the family photo wall. And I handed them over without asking why, because I had the kind of faith that is just habit dressed up pretty. They disappeared for 3 weeks. When I asked, she said she'd put them somewhere safe. I should have asked harder. Love isn't a good enough reason to be sloppy with yourself. The night before the basement, I left a parent-teacher conference carrying a stack of construction paper book reports, tiny stapled corners with crayon covers that smelled exactly like the first day of school. A mother I admire, single like me, fierce like a lighthouse, hugged me hard in the hallway and said, "You're doing such a good job with your kids. I can tell who's raising them by how they share." I drove home and parked at the curb because Brian had taken the driveway again. He said his equipment was heavy and said it was easier this way. I sat in the car longer than necessary and watched the windows of my parents' house glow. There is a peculiar ache in wanting to walk into a place that should be home and knowing your presence is an inconvenience. When I finally went in, the house smelled like lemon cleaner. Things that smell clean can still be dirty. It was the last normal night. In the motel, Noah finished his hot chocolate and looked at me in that direct way he has that both terrifies and reassures me, because it means I cannot lie without also losing him. "Were you like me?" he asked. "When you were little, did you have to sleep in the not best place?" "Worse," I said, "because I have spent enough years translating reality into palatable form for other people, and I am done doing it for my children. But I'm your mother, and that means your story will not be my story." He nodded like that was a contract he could sign with his eyes. He lay down without another word, turned on his side, and within minutes his breathing evened. I lay on the other bed with Lily's hand curled around my finger and stared at the ceiling texture until it turned into a topographic map. I traced hills and valleys and found a path out. Here is something I haven't said out loud. I used to think leaving would make me disloyal. That there was a ledger in the sky where debts of care were kept, and my parents' names were written next to mine with arrows, and I owed and owed and owed. Children do not owe adults a hallway pass for cruelty. That sounds obvious until you're in a hallway that looks like yours and smells like Sunday pot roast, and the people who taught you please and thank you are telling you to be reasonable. Reasonable would have been negotiating for one good room. Reasonable would have been sharing. Reasonable would have been explaining gently how basements can be cozy if you hang twinkle lights and call it an adventure. Reasonable would have been the slow death of my children's sense of worth. I am done being reasonable. The AC kicked harder and rattled, and it made a small squeal like a flute hitting a note too high. It was the exact pitch of the brake on my bicycle when I was 12, the bike I had found at a garage sale and polished until it gleamed like I had loved it into being new. I spent an entire summer riding the same 3 streets, cataloging which dogs barked, which porches had wind chimes, and which houses had people who waved. The day Brian wanted to borrow it, and I said no, my mother leaned in close, lips thin. "Don't make a scene." He took it. He left it out in the rain. I dried it with towels from under the sink and realized that the problem with letting people decide what you owe is that they will always spend what you don't have. It would be easy to say, I should have known tonight would happen because patterns repeat. But should have known is a tool people use when they have never been hurt in a way that teaches you to unknow yourself for safety. I knew enough when Noah asked his question. I knew enough when Lily shook in the hallway. I knew enough when my mother said good enough with her mouth and get small with her eyes. I texted my principal while the kids slept. Family emergency. I need 2 days, I wrote. She replied in under a minute. Take care. We've got your class. I stared at the 3 dots that didn't appear because she didn't need more. She trusted that I was a professional who would show back up. It's a particular kind of holiness when someone believes you without requesting collateral. I opened my laptop, and the glow lit the room like a low moon. I scrolled through a folder I had started months ago, the one I had named later, like a dare to my future self. Photos of the kids' rooms before we moved in, screenshots of texts from my mother about who was allowed upstairs and why. Copies of emails from the school in our old district where I had tried to keep them enrolled because the teachers knew them and my parents had insisted moving districts was logical, and then used the new address to scold me about drop-off times. A scanned page from my grandmother's ledger that Aunt June had mailed in an envelope with no return address. The one that listed education first grandchild with a neat sum next to it, and a smaller sum subtracted 6 months before Brian's 17th birthday memo line vehicle. I clicked on a note I'd written to myself on a bad night when I couldn't sleep. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are someone with a story. Write it in ink. Lily turned in her sleep and mumbled something that sounded like mermaids, and for the first time since the hallway, I smiled without my teeth hurting. I thought about the first apartment I ever rented when I was 22, the paint that chipped like a sunburn, the radiator that clanged in the middle of the night, the way I had placed a blue bowl by the door to hold keys, and pretended that meant I was a person with rituals instead of a person trying not to drown. I thought about the house my parents live in now, the one my father built additions onto with his hands, the one that has my height pencil marks on the pantry door from ages 5 through 11, and then stops because the attic doesn't have doorways you can measure against. Houses hold so much that isn't wood. In the morning, the kids woke folded into each other like 2 halves of one brave thing. I brushed my hair and packed my backpacks and said out loud what I wanted them to memorize by muscle. We are safe. We are loved. We are not basement people. Noah laughed. Lily asked if basemen were the men who stood on bases, and I kissed her forehead. I checked us out at the counter with the gray sweatshirt woman, and she said, everything okay, in the tone that means she will accept whatever answer you give and still hope for your best outcome. Getting there, I said, and the words felt like a small step onto new ground. Outside, the sky was the thin kind of blue that means the day is going to try. We got into the Honda, and the car didn't start the first time. I whispered please, and turned the key again, and it caught. I exhaled and gripped the wheel and looked at the 2 faces in the rearview mirror that anchor me to the earth. You tell a story to your children every day, even when you don't speak. Tonight, mine has a new chapter. It begins with leaving. It continues with choosing. It will end with a door that is ours, and a mantle with their pictures in frames that face the light. When we pulled onto the road, I realized I'd left something at my parents' house, my fear of making a scene. It can live there with the lemon cleaner and the drum set and the word legacy etched into the crown molding. The scene I chose is the one I will write in rooms that do not require anyone to earn sunlight. The AC's hum in my memory softened into the sound of tires on morning asphalt, into Lily, humming a song about mermaids, into Noah asking if he could be in charge of picking out where the couch should go when we find our place because he's good at making maps. Yes, I said. You'll be our cartographer. He grinned like I'd handed him a medal. A mile down, a billboard flashed an ad for a legal aid clinic I had noticed 100 times and never seen. I memorized the number without meaning to. The motel's hot chocolate still warmed my hands through the paper cup I hadn't thrown away yet. The cup said, "Thank you" in block letters, and for a ridiculous second I imagined it was the world talking to me. Not for being saintly, not for being quiet, for not teaching my children that love means sleeping under the stairs. If my life until now has been a ledger tonight, I turned the page. The balance won't fix itself. But I have a pen. I have proof. I have 2 reasons for breathing in the back seat. And I have the map of my own making that doesn't root through basements. I don't know yet where we'll land. I know only that the door we open next will make a different sound than the one that closed behind us. The sound wood makes when it's held by hinges that don't rust from being slammed. My parents will call. They will say words about family and forgiveness and reasonableness. They will invoke holidays and heritage, and what will people say? They will ask me to be the person I have been for them since I could carry 2 plates at once. They will not understand that when I knelt in a hallway and told my children to pack their bags, I packed something of mine too, the need to be blessed by people who confuse love with hierarchy. Tonight is not revenge. Tonight is the foundation. But foundations are what hold up houses, and houses are where rooms are decided. And rooms are not neutral. They teach. They announce. They bless or withhold. My children will know rooms that bless. The Honda's engine settled into its steadiness. Noah looked at me, and then at the road and said, "Where to, Mom?" "Somewhere with windows," I said. "Somewhere upstairs." And for the first time in a long time, my voice sounded like it belonged to a woman I would follow. At 7:02 a.m., in the motel parking lot, I opened my laptop on the steering wheel and typed legal aid plus county with the kind of steadiness that only arrives after a night that rearranges your bones. The Honda's dashboard clicked as it cooled from the short drive to pick up breakfast from the lobby. Noah and Lily were inside at a two-top by the window, Lily dangling her legs and concentrating too hard on a cup of yogurt, Noah cutting his waffle into precise squares as if order could make a new morning. I watched them through the glass while the motel's automatic doors opened and closed in size and bookmarked a website that promised a free intake in 48 hours if you had documentation. Documentation. I could do documentation. I had done documentation my whole life, just not for myself. I flipped the motel notepad over. At the top, I wrote 3 words: plan, then peace. And under those words, I began laying down a bridge plank by plank, as if I were building a way out across dark water. First plank, a new P.O. box. Today. Second, the school. Change the emergency contacts. Reset the pickup passwords. Today. Third, the pediatrician. Password updated. No delays. Fourth call, legal aid. Intake appointment this morning. Fifth County Register of Deeds. Search the house records. Today. Sixth, order the kids' birth certificates. Seventh, photos. Rooms. Basement. Already captured on my phone. Check. Eighth, Aunt June's ledger. Scan the page. Bring it. Ninth, the bank. Open a second account. Later. Quietly. 10th, email the principal. Ask for days off. Already done. 11th, the timeline. Start now. Each line felt like wood hitting water. Each task a step forward. And for the first time in years, the bridge was mine to walk. There was a rhythm in the way the pen moved. I felt it in my wrist and then in the back of my neck, like something loosening one notch. Mom. Noah pushed the passenger door open with his hip. They have those cereal cups. Lucky you, I said. Grab one for your sister. We're doing an adventure list. He read it solemn like he reads everything. What's a register of deeds? The office where houses tell the truth, I said. And he nodded. Like that made perfect sense. We ate in the car because the kids liked how the seats felt like a fort when the doors were closed. Lily insisted on buckling herself, and the click was so loud in the quiet morning that I felt something settle. After breakfast, we swung by a post office a mile down a squat brick building, with a flag moving like it remembered how. The line was short, a man with a cap that said Navy, a woman mailing a birthday box padded with tissue paper. When it was our turn, the clerk slid a form across, bored but kind. Reason for P.O. box, she asked without looking up. Mail, I said. But Safe. She did look up at that. The glance wasn't pity. It was recognition. 3 months, 6, or a year 6, I said, and the word felt like I'd purchased time. As we exited, I slipped the key into my pocket and left my parents' address behind like a shed skin. The sun was warming the asphalt. Lily asked if we could name the P.O. box. "We'll call it upstairs," I said. She grinned a gap showing where a tooth would be growing. We drove to school next. I had texted my principal the night before. She told me to come when I could and not to apologize. The school secretary, Ms. Cole, slid a clipboard towards me and pointed her pen where to initial. We added a pickup password. Noah chose Seahorse. Lily insisted on Mermaid, so we compromised C. Ms. Cole typed it in, and I watched her fingers move over the keyboard like she was sealing a spell. In the hall, I bent to eye level with Noah and Lily. "That word is ours," I said. "If anyone without me tries to pick you up and doesn't know it, you stand still like a mountain and ask Ms. Cole to call me." "A mountain," Lily said gravely, planting her feet. "Sea mountain." Noah laughed. It was the first sound in 24 hours that didn't scrape. I walked them to their classrooms. Their teachers didn't ask questions in the hallway, the good ones never do. They just soften their shoulders and widen the space around your children so they can walk through it more easily. I kissed 2 foreheads and walked out feeling both lighter and more responsible than I had a right to in one body. From the school, I called the pediatrician and asked to set a password there too. The receptionist was a woman I knew only by her voice, bright and efficient. "You can choose any word," she said, "but maybe not the kids' birthdays or pet names." "Upstairs," I said before I could consider. There was a logic I was building without having to draw a map. When I reached the legal aid line, it rang 5 times before it clicked, and an intake worker named Tasha answered. She sounded like the kind of person who could talk a storm into taking a different route. I told her the tight version, the version that sits on top of the stack. My parents moved my kids' belongings to the basement I left with them. I need to understand my options about guardianship interference, educational records, and an old ledger that suggests misappropriation from a fund intended for me years ago. "Okay," she said, and the word didn't mean approval or dismissal. It meant, "I'm with you." "Here's what we can do now. Document everything in a timeline, dates what was said, and who was present. Save texts, take photographs, order replacement birth certificates, and freeze the kids' credit. Update your emergency contacts at school and doctors." "Done doing," ordered, I said. I liked how that sounded in my mouth. She continued. "As for the education fund, if it wasn't a formal trust, it's complicated, but not impossible. A ledger with your grandmother's handwriting is a start. We'll need context witnesses and any mention in letters or emails. On the house, check the county records. Tell me what you see. If you feel unsafe, we can discuss a protective order. But from what you've said, this is a boundaries and civil remedies situation, not immediate danger. 2 appointments are open on Thursday afternoon. Can you come at 2? Yes, I said immediately, because the idea of a time on a calendar that led to a door I could open was everything. "Bring everything," she said. "And Emily." She said my name like I had introduced myself as someone who could choose her life. "You're doing the right things. Keep your voice calm when you need to talk to them. Calm is its armor." I hung up and rolled my shoulders. The horizon line inside me rose by an inch. The County Register of Deeds website was smugly unhelpful on my phone, so I drove us to the library because computers there have bigger screens and better old men to help you print. In the lobby, a fountain burbled like it had too much purpose for so small a thing. The children's storytime corner was ringed with low shelves of books with wide spines, and for a second I had to swallow hard because the world contains so many rooms that bless. On the public terminal, I typed in my parents' address and a list unfurled a deed dated the year I was 9. A refinancing in a year I tried to forget. A home equity line of credit opened a summer I remember because the backyard smelled like cut cedar, and Brian announced he was going to finally make it. And then a line that made my pulse hitch transfer on death deed recorded 6 months ago. Grantors, my parents' names. Grantee beneficiary, Brian, last name. Consideration $10 legal description with lot and block that read like coordinates to something that used to be a star map. Transfer on death. A signature. A notary. A rectangle of paper filed in a place where paper is law. I stared, and for a second all I could feel was the weight of that motel key in my pocket, the one that had felt heavy and then blessed. This weight felt different. It was the exact heaviness of understanding how far a story had already been written without you in its margins. I clicked the document. It loaded as a PDF. The scanned images were slightly skewed, and the notary stamp was a little fuzzy. Their signatures, I'd know them anywhere. I had copied one onto field trip forms in middle school, with a flourish that embarrassed me now to remember. There was a box near the bottom that read, "Effective upon the death of grantors." My mother's voice in my head weeks ago. "Don't worry about the house. One day it will be Brian's to do with as he sees fit. That's just practical." I printed the document and slid it into the folder I had labeled later. I renamed the folder Now. Back on the search page, I clicked deeper. There was a HELOC opened the year I came back with babies. There were property tax late notices marked paid, paid, paid in a neat hand, my father's. The numbers told a story that lined up eerily with family arguments. I remembered the quiet ones in the kitchen held with forks and knives instead of words, the loud ones in the driveway, when Brian slammed a door on a syllable and left the porch light bobbing like a buoy behind him. I wrote the dates in my timeline to D recorded 6 months ago. HELOC opened 2 years ago. Taxes late last year. I didn't know what any of it meant yet in terms of law. I only knew what it meant in terms of pattern, that the house had never been neutral ground and it had been braced to lean in one direction all along. My phone buzzed on the library table. The name that lit up on the screen was a small twist Aunt June. Her text, "You ready to stop holding your breath? Call me." I stepped outside into air that felt several degrees more honest and hit call. She picked up on the second ring. I went to the library, I said, not bothering with hello. "There's a transfer on death deed to Brian." "Mm-hmm," she said. "Your mother said it was practical. She said boys don't build roots unless you give them soil with their name on it." "I'm not sure boys learn roots that way," I said. "I think they learn chairs." June laughed like it hurt. "I sent you the ledger copy, right? In an envelope with no return address." "Good, keep it close. There's a letter too. Your grandmother wrote it the year before she died. It was never mailed. I found it in a Bible cover. She writes about wanting you to have your ocean. I don't know if that means anything to you." It hit me like a small holy shove. The book I'd asked for when I was 9. The one about currents and tides. "It does," I said, voice breaking so quickly I had to swallow around the edges. "It does. I'll bring it by this week," she said, "or I'll meet you somewhere your mother doesn't go, which is anywhere truth is sold." I smiled. Then a real one, the smile that makes my face feel like mine. "Thank you," I said. She sighed. "You're doing it, Em. Took you long enough." Then she softened. "No, that's not fair. It took them too long to stop counting on you not doing it." I hung up feeling steadier than I had any right to on 1 cup of motel coffee. Inside, I pulled Noah from a science book and Lily from a beanbag and told them we had one more stop before lunch. They didn't complain. They are warriors who happen to be children. At Vital Records, the woman behind the glass had the formidable patience of someone who deals daily with people who realize paper is power. She slid a form through the slot and asked for IDs. I twisted my driver's license so the light hit it and caught my eye in the reflection, and thought, more woman than girl now, no matter what rooms I've slept in. "Reason for replacement?" she asked, reading without moving her lips. "Misplaced by a family member," I said. The words were accurate without telling on anyone more than necessary. "I want to place a notation that no third party can request copies without my presence or a court order." "We don't do flags like that," she said, not unkindly. "But you can set a contact note on the file. If anyone calls, we'll see it." "Do that," I said. I wrote in careful block letters, "Mother only." Password, upstairs. When she stapled the receipt to a page and slid it back, the click sounded like the closing of a tiny door behind us. We ate lunch at a diner with a neon sign that flickered like a heartbeat. Lily got pancakes again. Breakfast for lunch is fancy, she declared, and Noah asked me whether we would have to move far. I told him we'd move only as far as we needed to find light. He said he understood. He's always understood light. The afternoon slid into the kind of blue that makes lines sharper street signs, parking meters, the outlines of things you ignore when you're busy ignoring yourself. We went to the bank because there was a branch that smelled like pens and printer ink and possibility. I opened a second account with a balance that made me brace my shoulders, and then I set alerts on my phone for every transaction over $20, because the part of me that watches can finally watch in my favor. Back in the car, the kids dozed, and I made 2 more calls to the school district to confirm my children's address for enrollment was mine to provide, not my parents', and to my principal to say that I needed the second day and that I'd be back Monday. "We'll be here," she said. "And Emily, I'm proud of you. It's strange how pride can sit in an adult body like sunlight. It goes to the places that had been cold." Before we drove back to the motel, I did one more thing. I went by the house. I knew enough to park down the block and not step onto the property. I sat with the engine running and took 3 photographs from the driver's seat through the windshield. The upstairs windows open to early spring air. The basement window wells catching light. The front porch with the potted fern my mother has babied through winters for 15 years. This was evidence, but it was also a ritual to see it with my eyes, to record that I had not imagined it, that rooms can be measures of love, and not just square footage. As I pulled away, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unsaved number that my stomach recognized before my brain did my mother. "You dramatized this," the bubble read. "Stop making a scene. Bring the children home. They'll adjust." I stared at the screen until the letters looked like someone else's alphabet and typed with slow fingers, "No." She responded with a paragraph that weaponized holidays and had the words "family" and "respect" in capital letters, as if tone could be a court order. I did not reply. It is a radical thing not to answer when you've been trained your whole life to keep a conversation going, because silence makes other people uncomfortable. At the motel, the woman in the gray sweatshirt gave us extra towels like a benediction. The kids took turns washing their hair and arguing about which shampoo smelled more like summer. I opened the laptop again and began the timeline, bullet points, dates, quotes. The cream of events skimmed and lined up until a story formed, the way rainwater outlines a river, it always meant to find. Age 9. Attic move. Drums taken away. They said it was temporary. Age 16. Job after school. Saved every dollar. Found out the college fund doesn't exist. Age 22. First apartment. 1 blue bowl on the counter. Freedom tasted fragile but real. Age 32. Moved back with kids. They called it stability. I called it starting over. Age 34. Birth certificate somewhere safe. Reappeared 3 weeks later. Age 34. Basement move. Our other grandson deserves the best rooms. Age 34. Left, motel nights. Legal aid appointment set for Thursday soon p.m. Age 34. Register of deeds transfer on death. Deed to Brian signed 6 months ago. Age 34. Home equity loan 2 years ago. Taxes late last year. Age 34. New P.O. box. Changed school password. Pediatrician password. Ordered vital records. Age 34. Aunt June ledger found. Letter tucked inside. 3 words. Have your ocean. When I was done, the screen glowed a steady white. It looked like a page in a book. It looked official enough that the part of me that doubts sat down and shut up. That night, after pizza on the bed, because we decided that for once crumbs were going to be a celebration, not a crime, Noah drew a map in a motel brochure margin, a square for our apartment to be, with 4 windows and stick figures for us in front of it. He labeled it the upstairs. Lily colored the windows yellow. She said yellow is what good rooms look like. While they slept, I clicked through a backup folder I haven't had the strength to open in months, the one I made for later when I thought later was an indulgence. There were photos of the kids' rooms the day I first made them up in my parents' house, the bedspreads smoothed, the books aligned, the stuffed animals lined in a row like a tiny audience. I had taken them for myself to remember that I had made beauty within limits. I took screenshots of those too and added them to a folder called Before They Erased Us. It sounds dramatic, I know, but some words have to be called what they are or they keep their teeth. I opened a second tab and typed minor credit freeze TransUnion Equifax Experian. The instructions were stranger than they should be for something so simple, but within an hour I had printed confirmation codes. I put them in a new envelope in the motel drawer and wrote again with the block letters that always feel like scaffolding upstairs. Near midnight my phone buzzed with one more text. This one from Aunt June. A phone number and 2 words, call Mark. Mark. My father's old hunting buddy, a retired attorney, the man who once hammered a nail into a beam at our house with one clean swing, and then checked if the doorframe was true like he didn't trust his eyes until the level agreed. He had a voice like sandpaper and the kind of manners that make you sorry for calling him Mister. He hadn't been to the house in years. He and my father had fallen out over politics or pride, or something that men say is about ideas when it's just about who gets to be right. Whose? Mark Noah asked sleepily from the bed, eyes slitted like a cat's. Someone who knows when things are level, I said. In the quiet that comes after deciding, I put my phone face down and stared at the dark. There is a fear that visits you on the first night you choose yourself. It comes dressed in all the warnings you were taught as care. You'll regret it. You're overreacting. Don't make a scene. It sits on the edge of your bed and waits for you to invite it under the covers. I let it sit. I did not make it tea. I fell asleep with my hand on the envelope in the drawer like people used to sleep with passports under their pillows when borders meant running. Morning felt like a clean page. I could hear carts in the hallway and someone laughing 2 rooms down. We packed quickly. Motel packing is the opposite of moving. You put your life into sacks and call it efficiency instead of grief. On the way to school, we stopped at the P.O. box and the little door opened like the beginning of a new paragraph. Empty, of course, but it was emptiness that belonged to us. The plan for the day was simple: on paper drop kids call Mark, print what I needed for Thursday, breathe. On the school sidewalk, Lily wrapped herself around my leg like a koala and whispered, "Do we get the upstairs today?" "Not today," I said, "but soon. We're building." She nodded like a foreman. Back in the car, I dialed the number June had sent. It rang, and I was about to hang up when a voice slid onto the line like a door opening just enough. "Mark." "Hi," I said. "It's Emily Parker. June gave me your number." There was a pause and then the sound of a chair being pulled up. "Your father's Emily." "I'm Emily," I said, and let the air rest on the word so it could find its shape. "What's going on?" I told him the headline, and some subheads: rooms moved, basement transfer on death ledger that reads like love, legal aid appointment, children safe, me tired, but pointed. "Okay," he said. "You're doing the right sequence. Don't confront. Document. Do you have pictures?" "Yes." "Timeline?" "Yes." "Good. One thing, call the county clerk and ask for a copy of any household occupancy agreements filed with your address. If your parents are trying to play smart, they might have had you sign something you didn't read closely when you moved back in house rules disguised as an agreement. If there is one, we'll want to see it. Also call the tax assessor. Ask who claimed your children as dependents last year. It'll matter later." I wrote as he spoke. The list was growing the way good plans do, thicker and more useful, less like fantasy. "I'll help if I can," he said. "Not as counsel, I'm done with all that, but as someone who can tell you where the floor is." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it in a way that sounded like water. After we hung up, I sat still in the driver's seat and let the quiet make its case. Calm is its armor. I could be calm. I had been calm my whole life for other people's comfort. Now I would do it for mine. I drove to the county clerk's office, cavernous, fluorescent, the kind of place where strangers stand in lines that braid together and unbraid without touching. "Occupancy agreement," the woman at the counter repeated, eyebrow raised. No filings. That's private in a family house. If they had you sign something, it's theirs. Did they? No, I said. They had me sign nothing. They had me sign a silence. She nodded like she understood the distinction and slid me a public inquiry form anyway. Write what you're looking for on the back. Sometimes paper reveals itself when you're specific. At the tax assessor's counter, a clerk in a shirt printed with tiny pineapples tapped keys and told me what I already suspected but needed to hear in consonants and vowels, dependents claimed by you, not by your parents. I thanked him and he said, "Glad you asked." He said it like he hopes more people will learn their names in their systems. At the library again, I printed everything I had, punched holes, slid pages into a binder I bought at the drugstore, along with shampoo that smelled like coconut and a highlighter that promised to be sunshine yellow. I labeled tabs house, ledger, school, medical, taxes, birth certs, timeline. There was a satisfaction to the order that I will not apologize for. Some of us have needed to see things lined up our whole lives, because the people around us were busy laying out red carpets for someone else. I added one last tab at the end and wrote in my neatest teacher writing, Ocean. Under it, I placed Aunt June's text about the letter. I left a slot for the page that was coming. It felt like leaving a seat at the table for the person who finally gets to speak. As I closed the binder, my phone lit up with a new email confirmation from Legal Aid Thursday at 2 p.m. An address, a PDF with what to bring. I read the list and smiled because for the first time in a long time, what they needed and what I had were the same. On my way to pick up the kids, I drove past the courthouse just to see its face. The columns were too confident, the steps worn where people's shoes had made their own decisions. A woman came out holding a stack of papers close to her chest, like a small animal she had promised to keep alive. She looked up at the sky and closed her eyes like weather is a prayer. I didn't decide anything in that moment. I didn't need to. Decisions had been happening all day in the kinds of ways that build. That evening back at the motel, we ate takeout Chinese and let the paper fortune cookies crack and rain small slips onto the quilt. Lily's said, "You are brave without having to prove it." Noah's said, "Maps are stories someone finished." Mine said, "A quiet plan is still a plan." I taped mine to the inside cover of the binder like a joke that isn't funny because it's true. When the kids were asleep, I sat on the edge of the bed with the binder on my lap and let the room's hum wash over me. My hands were steady. The fear on the edge of the bed had wandered somewhere else to haunt someone who still thought scenes were impolite instead of necessary. I thought about the way my smile felt in the hallway the night before, how it had made my mother's face twitch because she didn't recognize it. That smile had hidden a plan then. It didn't have to hide anymore. The phone was in my hand before I consciously chose it. I scrolled to my mother's name. I didn't open the thread. I didn't need to. I started a new one, typed 3 sentences, and hit send. I will meet with legal aid on Thursday. Do not contact the school or the pediatrician. Any further communication can be in writing. Emily. No exclamation points, no softeners, no sorry. The dots didn't appear. Maybe she put the phone face down like I had last night. Maybe she called my father into the kitchen and said words like disrespect and spectacle. Maybe she stared at the screen and saw my name without their last name clamped like a title before it. And maybe she felt what I have felt my whole life, the slightest lurch when a thing you thought you owned stands up and walks away. Outside, a truck rumbled by, and for a wild second it sounded like the ocean, like something vast moving toward shore. I lay back on the pillow and closed my eyes and imagined a house with 4 windows and a door that only opens when you say so. I imagined yellow rooms. I imagined stairs that led upward. Morning would come, and with it, Part 4 calling Mark again, pulling a third party into the light, letting truth sit at the table, letting it speak. For now my plan lay beside me on paper. For now my children slept upstairs. For now that was everything. The first call came just after breakfast. My phone buzzed across the motel nightstand while Noah was still buttering his toast, and Lily was humming about mermaids with her hair sticking in every direction. The name on the screen made me pause. Mark Ellison. Mark was my father's old hunting buddy. The kind of man who smelled faintly of cedar and gasoline, who had sat at our kitchen table on Sunday afternoons and talked about fishing licenses and property lines like they were scripture. He hadn't been around in years after some argument with my father about money and pride, but his name carried weight. I hesitated for 3 rings, then answered, "Emily." His voice was gravelly low and steady. "Yes. Your Aunt June said you'd be calling. Or maybe you wouldn't. She said you were still learning how to stop holding your breath." I swallowed. "I'm calling." "Good. Then I'll talk and you'll listen." There was something in his tone that reminded me of the way a teacher commands a classroom, not by shouting, but by simply refusing to be ignored. "I don't want to stir the pot," he began, "but I think you already know the pot's been boiling a long time. Your father told me last year that he signed over the house to Brian. He called it practical. He called it a guarantee that his line would carry on." The word line made my stomach tighten. Legacy. Always legacy. "You knew," I asked, sharper than I intended. "I knew enough," Mark said. "But what I didn't know was that they'd drag your children into it. That was a step too far. And if you're ready, Emily, I can tell you things I probably should have told you years ago." I sat down on the edge of the bed. Noah glanced up from his toast. Lily hummed louder like she could drown out grown-up voices. "Tell me," I whispered. Mark spoke slowly like he was measuring each word. He told me about a trust account my grandmother had set up in my name. Not just a promise in a ledger, but an actual account meant for me, meant for school. He said my father had petitioned to move the funds when Brian needed a fresh start in his 20s. He said it was done quietly, framed as for family use. I told him he was stealing, Mark said. He said I didn't understand loyalty. I said loyalty without fairness is just tyranny dressed in Sunday clothes. That's when we stopped speaking. My chest burned. "And you never told me you were still so young. And I thought maybe, just maybe your parents would grow a conscience when you had children of your own." "I was wrong. I'm sorry." The line went quiet for a beat. "Emily," he said softer now, "I've watched you bend your whole life. Bending doesn't mean breaking, but it does mean silence. And silence is what they counted on. Don't give it to them anymore." When the call ended, I sat still. Noah leaned his elbow on the table, watching me carefully. "Was that Grandpa?" he asked. "No," I said, "but it was someone who sees the truth." "Do we get to see it too?" The question made my throat close. "Yes," I promised. "You will." That afternoon I met Mark at a diner off the highway, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and pie slices under cloudy glass. He was older, grayer, but his eyes hadn't softened. He slid an envelope across the table like it was contraband. Inside were photocopies, bank statements, correspondence, even a letter with my father's signature authorizing the transfer. My name was still there, typed neatly at the top of the original account. "It was yours," Mark said simply. "And they took it." I pressed my fingers to the paper like it was skin. My reflection ghosted in the plastic cover he'd slipped it into. "They always said there was nothing, that I was imagining." "That's how power hides," he said. "It convinces you that your memory is wrong." A twist snapped in my chest. For years I had carried suspicion like a shadow, thinking maybe I was too sensitive, maybe I exaggerated. But here on paper was proof. I felt my hands steady for the first time in days. The waitress came by, coffee pot in hand. "Top you off?" she asked. Mark shook his head, but I nodded. As she poured, she glanced at the papers and raised her brows. "Looks serious," she said. "It is," I replied. "It's the truth." She didn't pry. She just refilled my cup and left behind a check with a smiley face drawn in purple ink. That night in the motel room, I laid the papers out on the bed like puzzle pieces. Noah traced the letters with his finger. "Does this mean they lied?" "Yes," I said without softening. "Then what happens now?" I folded the papers carefully. "Now we stop pretending. And we start building." The next morning, Aunt June arrived. She knocked twice sharp and certain before letting herself in. She carried a shoebox wrapped in twine. Before you ask, she said this isn't contraband, it's rescue. Inside the box were letters my grandmother's handwriting looping across yellowed paper. One dated months before she died said, "For Emily. So she can have her ocean." I touched the words, my throat tight. June looked me in the eye. Your grandmother wanted you to have more than rooms in an attic. She wanted you to know the world is bigger than what they gave you. A twist softer this time unfurled inside me. For years, I thought no one had seen me. But she had. She always had. We talked long into the afternoon. June told me stories about my grandmother saving spare bills in a coffee tin, whispering about Emily's tide. She told me how my mother bristled at the idea of me being chosen for anything. She told me she had kept quiet because she thought maybe peace was better than truth. But peace without truth, she said, is just a prettier cage. That evening after June left, I sat by the motel window with my laptop glowing in the dark. I began writing everything down, not just timelines and documents, but the small moments too. The birthdays with lopsided cakes, the attic winters, the ledger that disappeared. As the words filled the screen, I felt something shift. This wasn't just a record for court or lawyers. This was testimony. My story wrestled out of silence and inked into permanence. The next day the phone rang again. This time it was my cousin Dana whispering like she was afraid someone might hear. "I heard what happened," she said. "They're saying you overreacted, that you stormed out. But Emily, we all know how it's always been. I just want you to know I believe you." Her words were small, but they landed like stones building a bridge. By the end of that week, the seeds were planted. Mark's papers, June's letters, Dana's whisper. The narrative my parents had written for decades was beginning to fracture. And once a crack forms, no matter how much you plaster over it, the wall remembers. That night, after putting Noah and Lily to bed, I stood at the motel window and looked out at the parking lot lights. I thought of the house on the hill, glowing with its warm facade. I thought of the papers in my folder, the letters in my shoebox, the allies who had begun to surface. And I whispered almost to myself, "You can't erase me anymore." The words hung in the air like a vow. By 9 the next morning, I'd learned the exact pitch our motel alarm clock made when it wanted attention too cheerful for a room with thin walls and a headboard that rattled. I turned it off, slid my binder into my tote, and told myself out loud, "Today is allies." Saying the word made the room feel larger, like I'd pushed one wall back an inch with syllables alone. The hook came faster than I expected. My phone buzzed with the name I hadn't seen in years, Sarah Whitmore. We met in 10th grade over a shared pen and a shared eye roll an hour into algebra. She was the kind of friend who remembered your coffee order and your birthday, who braided your hair before homecoming, and told you when your eyeliner was crooked and when your dream wasn't. We drifted after college because life is a river with busy banks. I hadn't thought to reach for her. She'd reached for me. Her voice came bright and focused, even through motel acoustics. "I'm 2 exits away. Don't argue. I have coffee pastries and a trunk full of nosiness. If you say no, I'll circle the block until you say yes." I laughed in a way that felt like a window opening. "Room 214, I said. But please, keep the nosiness. Bring the coffee." 10 minutes later, she knocked in a pattern we used in high school to signal, "It's me." 3 fast, 2 slow. When I opened the door, she was exactly, and not at all like I remembered, same wide, honest smile, sharper eyes, a tote bag that meant business. She took one look at my face, then at Noah and Lily sprawled on the bed with cereal cups, and she didn't gasp or pity or perform. She slid the coffee into my hand like a sacrament and kissed the tops of my kids' heads. "I'm Auntie Sarah," she told them with the kind of confidence that doesn't ask permission. "And my superpower is snacks." Noah, cautious as a cat, softened at superpower. Lily, who believes in mermaids and momentum, accepted a croissant like it were treasure. "Sit," Sarah said, and I did, because sometimes the right people move your body before your brain can argue. She took in the binder on the table. Good, she said. You're documenting. How much do you want to tell me and how much do you want me to leave outside? Tell, I said simply. All of it. I skimmed the headlines. She knew the shape already. Our town is small enough that news travels like weather. First things first, she said, pulling her laptop from her tote. I'm not here as a journalist. I'm here as your friend. But for later, my job is in my bag if you need it. Boundary set. Set, I said, grateful. I hadn't realized until that second how much I needed a friend who could be a friend without sharpening a pen. She slid a folder across the table in return. And this is something I wish you didn't need. Inside were printed screenshots from the neighborhood Facebook group where good intentions and casual cruelty took turns. The post was my mother's. The date was last night. The words were careful in the way trained people are careful when they mean to justify our daughter overreacted to a small household adjustment. Of course, the boys' rooms need to change as the family grows. She took the kids to a motel. Pray for wisdom. There were comments in the fake suite register. Some offered prayers with side-eye. One said, "Those rooms have been our family's tradition," as if paint colors were sacraments. Another, "Girls are adaptable." And then buried halfway down a reply from my mother to someone who asked for specifics. Our other grandson deserves the best rooms. Sarah tapped that line like it mattered because it did. She typed it, she said. Not hearsay, not your paraphrase. Hers. Save it. A small twist uncoiled in my chest, the vindication of seeing the exact words that cut me, put on paper by the hand that swung the blade. I took a photo of the print with my phone, forwarded it to my email, and saved it to 3 different places. Sarah watched with approval the way you watch someone learn to drive on a highway and stay in their lane. I know it's gross in there, she said, nodding at the print. But there are good people too. Dana commented 3 times, by the way. Your cousin? She said, Emily isn't dramatic, she's diligent. The thread got deleted. Screenshots don't delete. My mouth tugged into a smile before I decided to let it. How did you get all that? Sarah shrugged. I still coach the high school paper. Teens have informants in every PTA chat by accident. Then she sobered. Jokes aside, what do you need? Practical. Help me build a circle, I said. People who can hold truth with me. People who can be witnesses if this becomes formal. Circle, she repeated, already typing. Give me names. Aunt June. I said first because she had lit the match. Mark Ellison. Added, she said. Who else, Principal Hart? I added, surprising myself with how quickly her name rose. And Ms. Cole, the secretary. They introduced a pickup password. C. My mother will try to charm the policy out of them. Sarah grinned. Underestimate middle school secretaries and perish. I'll DM Ms. Cole to remind her she's a legend. She paused. Do you want me to reach out to Principal Hart or keep that line clean? I'll text her, I decided. Better from me. I sent the text. Hi, it's Emily Parker. Thank you for yesterday. I'm setting boundaries. If my parents or Brian appear, please log it. If needed, I will include it in the documentation. You have my gratitude. She responded before I'd locked the screen. We've already logged one attempt this morning. Your mother arrived at drop-off. Ms. Cole asked for the password. She didn't have it. Your mother argued. Ms. Cole pointed at the sign that says, No exceptions. I was there. It was handled. We've noted the time and filed an incident report. The kids are safe and smiling. I read it twice to make sure the sentence "the kids are safe and smiling" was English and not a hallucination. Then I sent the screenshot to the email thread Sarah had just opened and labeled Upstairs Team. Noah, who had absorbed the cadence of grown-up crisis with the casual brilliance of children, asked from the bed, Who's on the team? People who see, I said. People who don't use the word overreact when they mean inconvenient. He liked that. I could tell because he repeated it under his breath like a new favorite word. After school drop-off, Sarah and I drove to the pediatrician. This time I didn't go alone. The reception area had aquarium lighting and a train table with 3 cars that never stayed on their tracks. The office manager, Mr. Alvarez, recognized me and waved eyes kind behind square frames. Password, he asked, half sing-song. Upstairs, I said. He smiled like people do when they're in on the right kind of secret. In addition to the password, I said gently, can notes be placed about who can schedule or access records? We're a small practice, he said, voice dropping. We know your kids. But yes, I'll note that all changes require your consent. For the record, your mother came by yesterday asking to coordinate shots for school. We asked for the password. She didn't have it. We referred her to you. He slid a printed note across the counter. Date time inquiry response. Cool, calm ink. We make paper, he said. Because paper is what talks when mouths lie. I wanted to climb over the counter and hug him, but I settled for a thank you that sounded like something you say to someone who pulled you out of a river. Back in the car, Sarah exhaled a long, slow breath I hadn't known she was holding. Okay, she said. School log pediatrician, log FB screenshots. We have 3 legs of a stool. Let's build the rest. What's next? I asked. 2 tracks, she said, eyes bright. Legal and life. Legal. You've got Tasha at Legal Aid. I'll help you prep a packet, index it like a magazine table of contents. Life, you need an address that is not every night a motel, even if it's temporary. I called my cousin before I came. He manages a small complex east side. Nothing fancy, clean second floor walk-up, 2 bedrooms, good light. A unit just opened because a tenant moved in with her boyfriend and her cat refused to move in with them. Sarah grinned. The cat is now the complex mascot. The unit is staged with plants. Plants, Emily. It's an omen. I told him you'd come at 3 if you want. You'd need proof of income references and a deposit. He's flexible on the deposit. He owes me for being his alibi in 12th grade when he skipped calculus. I looked at her like she'd reached into my chest and set my heart down softer on a pillow. Are you real enough to get you a lease application? She said. Say the word. Say the word, I echoed back because sometimes a spell needs to be spoken twice. We filled the rest of the morning with calm that felt like armor. At the library, we spread my binder's guts over a public table and added the new logs in chronological order. Sarah insisted we scan everything and upload it to a cloud folder named with a code only I would recognize, then made a second copy on a USB drive she pulled from her bag like a magician. Journalists are just organized paranoids, she said. Lucky for you. While the scanner hummed, my phone buzzed. A new voicemail. I recognized the area code before I recognized the voice, my cousin Dana. She'd left a message instead of calling, maybe so she could say the truth without backtracking. M. Her voice trembled, then steadied. I'm saying this as a record. I was at Mom and Dad's, your parents' house, the day before the basement. I heard Grandma, your mom, say to Brian, we'll do it while she's at work. It'll be easier if we don't have her argue. He said, good, the kids' stuff can go downstairs. Our boy will take the West room. I didn't say anything. I should have. I am saying it now. If you need me to write it down, I will. I closed my eyes. The hum of the scanner sounded like an ocean in a shell. Premeditation. Not a tantrum. Not an accidental cruelty. A plan. I texted Dana before the guilt could tell her she had done enough. Can you email it? Time, date, what you heard, even if it feels small. She replied with a 3-line email that put the conversation in black and white. I printed it. The pages were warm in my hand. In that way, fresh paper feels like immediate proof. At noon, we grabbed sandwiches from a corner shop that filled the room with the scent of basil and hot bread. We took them to a park. The kids joined us, sloughing off the morning like snakeskins. Noah sprinted for the swings. Lily found a patch of clover and immediately began searching for one with an extra leaf to ensure our luck. Sarah and I tucked our feet up on a bench and ate like normal, which felt reckless and right. You know, she said between bites, everyone thinks revenge is the loud part, but it's usually quiet. It's paperwork and passwords, and knowing the right person at the right office because you smiled at them when they were doing a thankless job. It's choosing your voice and not spending it until it will ricochet off the right walls. I don't want revenge, I said, and meant it. I want rooms that bless, and a ledger that tells the truth. Then that's what we'll build, she said. Like a contract, one ally at a time. My phone buzzed with a new message from Principal Hart. Your mother returned at lunch. She tried to bring a bag of snacks to Noah's class. We thanked her, asked for the password. She didn't have it. We escorted her to the office and explained the policy again. She left. We've documented. I showed Sarah. She shook her head, amused and angry in equal measure. Respect to the gatekeepers, she said. I'll drop by after school with a box of muffins for the front desk, no story pretense. Just thanks. When the kids finished, Sarah lay on the grass and pointed at clouds like we were 13, as if naming their shapes might change the fact of what they were. That one's a house, she said, and I had to swallow. That one's a cat. That one's a giant binder with tabs. Lily giggled, the sound light enough to lift the corner of my heart. Noah muttered, that one's a mermaid, just to make his sister squeal. For 3 minutes there was no house on a hill with upstairs windows curated for someone else. There was a sky that had room for us. At 2:30, my phone alarm chirped. Apartment, Sarah said, reading my eyes. Ready. At 3, we stood in front of a building whose brick had aged kindly. Crepe myrtles flanked the walkway like 2 pink flags. The upstairs unit's door had a brass number that had been polished recently. It winked in the sun. Sarah's cousin Adam met us with a stack of papers and a keyring that jangled a little like the sound illustrations make when they want kids to know a page has turned. Emily, he said, pumping my hand with enthusiasm. Sarah speaks in italics about you. That's terrifying, I said. But thank you. He laughed, unlocked the door, and the smell hit me first. Clean, paint, old wood, the faint ghost of someone's vanilla candles. The living room was small, but honest. Light pooled. The kitchen had a window over the sink. The second bedroom had a corner where a small desk would fit if it had been waiting. Every step upstairs made something in me uncoil. Lily pressed her face to the window screen and breathed, Mom, look, trees. Noah palmed the wall as if to check the building's pulse. Where would the couch go? He asked, already mapping. Adam cleared his throat like he didn't want to break a spell. The tenant left early. Official move-in is the 1st of next month, but I can do early occupancy if the application is clean. Proof of income. References. Deposit normally first and last, but I can float last to the second paycheck. We want good tenants. Teachers are the gold standard. I can provide letters, I said quickly. From my principal. From the district. From the pediatrician. I laughed, and it sounded like I hadn't slept in a while and like I still had humor in reserve. Apply, he said. I'll prioritize it. I can't promise, but... He looked at Sarah. You're good people or she wouldn't have shown up with you. On the way out, a black cat wound around Lily's ankles. That's Pepper, Adam said. He belongs to everyone. He only lives upstairs. Of course he does, I thought, and took it for the omen it was. We returned to the motel with application papers in a neat clip and a new math in my head. Paycheck dates, deposit schedules, places to shave without cutting bone. I pulled up my budget and carved. No streaming, fewer treats, more library. I texted my principal. If I take an after-school tutoring block, 2 days a week, is there a slot? Also summer school. She responded within the hour. Yes to both. I'll put your name down now. I'll also write a letter today. While the kids showered, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When it ended, I pressed play. This is Mrs. Whitaker, the voice said, slow and painstaking, like a woman who chooses words because she knows they matter. I notarized a document for your parents 6 months ago. Your father asked me not to complicate things by calling you. That didn't sit right. I was at the final signing for the transfer on death deed. Your brother came alone to pick it up a week later with a bottle of whiskey he said was a thank you, which I declined. If anyone asks, I will say what I saw. The twist slid under my skin and locked into place like a well-cut joint. Not just paper, a person, witness, strong enough to hold weight. I called her back. She agreed to meet at the church basement after choir practice, because that was a place she felt safe enough to speak, and because my parents had switched churches years ago over a hymn selection that had nothing to do with hymns. Bring a copy, she said. I'll point to each line. I typed her name into the upstairs team thread and watched the list grow. It looked like a ladder. That night, Sarah sat cross-legged on the motel carpet, licking an envelope for the application, because the drop box at the complex was old school. She made jokes about paper cuts and adulthood. I laughed and wanted to cry for the gentleness of having an accomplice for clerical chores. We sealed the envelope and deposited it together like teenagers mailing a secret. On our way back, Sarah squeezed my shoulder. Tomorrow I will bring muffins to the school. You meet Mrs. Whitaker. You talk to Tasha. We keep building. Let them keep telling people you're dramatic. We'll keep making paper. Before bed, I texted Mark to update him. He replied with a photo of a sticky note on his desk: bank appointment Friday. The branch manager owes me a favor. Bring your grandmother's letter. He added, proud of you. The words landed with a weight that wasn't heavy at all. My mother didn't text that night. Silence can be a tactic. It can also be a sign that someone is recalculating, looking for a new lever. I lay on my side listening to the hum of the AC and the soft whistling that Lily makes when she is deeply asleep. I felt the shape of the day in my body, the way a circle feels different than a line, the way you can lean back into something if it holds. Morning didn't crash this time. It arrived. We poured cereal and laughed at how the milk carton had a cow that looked personally offended. We said password in 3 different voices on the way to school like a call and response. Ms. Cole winked at me and held up a bag of muffins Sarah had dropped off with a note that said in her block letters, for the gatekeepers. At the church basement, Mrs. Whitaker waited at a folding table with a music folder the color of robin's eggs. She wore a cardigan with tiny pearl buttons and a pin that said, alto. She shook my hand in a way that communicated 2 things she didn't play, and she warmed to those who told the truth. She opened my printed copy of the deed and flattened it with her palm. They came in together for the initial signature, she said, reading and nodding. Your mother handled the small talk. Your father made a joke about keeping things practical and boys needing to learn responsibility sometime. I didn't laugh. She pointed to a box. This is where I stamped. I stamp straight. I care about straight. It was all legal. I don't do illegal. But legal and good are not the same, Emily. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Do you mind writing that down? I asked, voice small in the space that smelled like hymnals and coffee. Not your opinion, your presence. I will, she said, and pulled a pen from her bag like a sword. For the record. We sat together while she wrote in careful script, the kind that indicates a teacher or a woman who taught herself how to write slowly so people would have to wait for the truth. She signed, dated, and slid the paper to me like an offering. Don't lose that, she said. Put it with whatever anchor you're building. Upstairs, I said, and she didn't ask. I loved her for that. Back in the car, I called Tasha at Legal Aid and told her about the new logs, the witness, and the application. She listened, made professional sounds of approval, and then said, here's the next thing. Ask Principal Hart to send you a letter on school letterhead confirming the attempted unauthorized pickup and the enforcement of password policy. It reads like a small thing. It is not. Courts love letterhead. Also have Mr. Alvarez send a note about the in-person request. Put those in with Mrs. Whitaker's statement and the deed. That bundle gets its tab. Label it third parties. It's the heart of your case. Third parties, I repeated. The heart. Yes, she said. Because power sounds different when it comes from the edges. Judges are human. They listen. After we hung up, I sat for a minute in the parking lot, and let language change my posture. The edges, I thought. That's where kindness lives. That's where truth grows. We had spent so many years with the center of our family pointing in the wrong direction that I'd forgotten to check the borders for light. At lunch, Sarah sent a photo from the school front desk, Ms. Cole holding a muffin like a trophy Principal Hart, with a dozen roses someone had dropped in gratitude for keeping our kids safe, a sign in the background with the password policy in sans serif, very large. "You're loved," Sarah texted. It landed like a verdict. After school, the kids and I went back to the apartment complex playground because I wanted to see the space filled with small noise. There were chalk drawings on the sidewalk, hopscotch squares faded to pastel. Pepper the black cat supervised like a small benevolent judge. Noah found a boy his age who wanted to talk about maps. Lily found two girls who wanted to talk about everything at once. I sat on a bench and let my body stop bracing. On the way out, Adam jogged over with an envelope. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," he said, lowering his voice to make sure I'd hear it, "but your application is clean. Background check's fine, references are gold. Principal Hart sent a letter that made my boss cry. The deposit takes a week. Keys on Monday if you want them. Upstairs." I held the envelope like I'd been handed a deed to weather. Monday, I said like a word you taste before you swallow. Yes. On the drive back to the motel, the kids argued cheerfully over whose name would be written on which shelf. It was the kind of argument I'd prayed for, one born of abundance and choice. At the stoplight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Elaine at the county clerk," it said. "I saw your inquiry come through. Off the record, there's a copy of a household agreement handwritten by your mother, not filed legally, titled House Rules. It outlines access to the upstairs rooms as for boys and to the basement as overflow. It's dated the week you moved back. It's not enforceable, but it's a good context. If you want to see it, it's in your family's church newsletter from that month." She submitted it as wisdom. "We keep everything." I pulled into a parking lot and laughed, not at the pettiness, at the way truth insists on leaving a trail. I typed back a thank you. Then I drove to the church where I had grown up kneeling in rows. Elaine met me in the office with a stack of newsletters wrapped in a rubber band. She slid one out like a magician pulls scarves. On page 3, Family Corner, with Mrs. Parker raising boys right. Under it, a column that might have been satire if it weren't my life. Sarah met us there because Sarah appears in the spaces where embarrassment might try to eat you. She took a photo, sent it to the upstairs team, and typed, "The things we do in daylight." We walked out into late afternoon light that dappled the parking lot in coins. My phone chimed. Legal aid confirmation for tomorrow. A text from Adam with a photo of a set of keys on a counter. A voicemail from Mrs. Whitaker. I found the copy of my notary log. I'll bring it. A text from Aunt June. Your grandmother would be doing a gentle cackle right now. And then at last, a message from my mother. We heard you're spreading stories. Family doesn't do that. I typed, family doesn't move children to basements, and didn't send it, because not every truth needs to be spent on an audience that is committed to its narrative. Instead, I sent a photo to upstairs team, the apartment window with trees beyond Noah's map, from the motel brochure Lily's crayon sun. I wrote keys. Monday. The thumbs up and heart reactions rolled in like a tide. That night in the motel, the envelope with application approved move in Monday lay on the dresser like a small gleaming thing. The kids fell asleep in a tangle that looked like a new constellation. I sat on the edge of the bed with my binder open to the tab Sarah had labeled third parties, and slid in the newsletter and Mrs. Whitaker's statement and the school letterhead and Mr. Alvarez's log. The plastic sleeves shushed as they took the weight. It sounded like agreement. I thought about a younger version of myself who believed you didn't ask for help because help was a debt. Tonight, every ally had offered without an invoice. Not because I was saintly or small, because the truth when told attracts people who want to live in its light. I turned off the lamp and lay back listening to the motel's AC hum in a key I was learning to sing. In the dark, a sentence wrote itself in my head. The circle holds. It is not a fence to keep me in. It is a ring of hands to keep me from falling. Outside somewhere, Pepper the cat prowled an upstairs ledge like a tiny herald. Inside my phone blinked with one more message, this one from Tasha. Tomorrow bring your calm, bring your paper, and bring the letter from your grandmother about the ocean. I whispered to the ceiling, I will, and felt sleep come like a tide carrying me toward a shoreline with windows and stairs that led up. At 1:58 p.m., I stood outside the glass door of the legal aid office with my grandmother's letter in my purse and my binder pressed flat against my ribs like a shield. The hallway smelled like copier toner and lemon cleaner, the same cocktail as the night I left, except this time it didn't smell like erasure. It smelled like preparation. I watched the second hand sweep toward the 12 and told myself out loud, but soft enough that only my heart heard it. Calm is armor. Inside, a receptionist with a sunflower pin looked up and smiled the kind of smile that doesn't pry. 2 o'clock with Tasha, she said. I nodded. She slid a clipboard across name, phone, reason. I wrote in block letters, the ones that had carried me through 2 days of paperwork and 20 years of swallowing Emily Parker. Interference with children's routine, documentation, housing safety, family property questions. When I handed it back, she pointed me toward a chair beneath a framed poster, Know Your Rights. The O in no had been filled with a child's crayon sun. I took it for a sign. Emily, a warm voice called. A woman about my age stood in the doorway, dark blazer flats you could walk miles in, hair pulled back, eyes that did the listening before the mouth did. I'm Tasha. We shook hands, and she led me into a small conference room, a round table, 2 chairs, and a box of tissues that looked both hopeful and resigned. I set the binder down. The plastic cover reflected the fluorescent light like a low lake. Start anywhere, she said, sitting with a pen poised, but not yet on paper. And take your time. I'll stop you if we need to slow for details. I didn't start with the attic. I didn't start with the summer. I surrendered a room to drums. I started with the basement. While I was at work, my parents emptied my kids' rooms, I said steady. They dragged every toy, every book, every blanket down to the basement. When I walked in, they said, Our other grandson deserves the best rooms. I watched her face for the flinch. She didn't flinch. She anchored. Okay, she said, and the word meant, I see you and I hear you and keep going. What happened next? I left with the children that night, I said. We stayed at a motel. The next morning I set passwords at school, and the pediatrician opened a P.O. box, began a timeline, and scanned documents. I have third-party logs. I flipped to the tab Sarah labeled third parties and slid the sleeves across Principal Hart's letter on letterhead Ms. Cole's incident log. Mr. Alvarez's note with date and time and the neighborhood post. My mother had typed herself, Our other grandson deserves the best rooms, circled in highlighter like a confession. Tasha read each page like a person hitting anchor points on a dock. This is excellent, she said, glancing up. Documentation outside witnesses, clear boundaries set, calm language. Her pen moved. We'll make 3 immediate moves. First, a formal boundary letter, polite, clear in writing, telling your parents that all school and medical matters are to be handled by you. Any further attempts to contact third parties will be considered interference. Second, we'll ask the school to add a second internal note if anyone arrives without the password. They are escorted off the premises and an incident report is created automatically. Third, we will request the pediatrician to place a no third-party scheduling comment in your children's charts, which Mr. Alvarez has effectively done. I'll formalize it in legal ease. She tapped the post with my mother's line. This goes in the bundle. Judges, principals, pediatricians, they're human. They understand when people tell on themselves. I breathed out and felt my shoulders let go by a single notch. Now she said gently, Tell me about property. I handed her the transfer on death deed printout, Mrs. Whitaker's statement, and a photocopy of my grandmother's ledger page that Aunt June had mailed in her envelope with no return address. Then I pulled out the letter, my grandmother's looping hand. the one that looked like her voice sounded in my head when she hummed hymns while doing dishes. I lay it on the table. For Emily, so she can have her ocean. Tasha read in silence. I watched the small muscles in her jaw flex like she was doing math. When she glanced up, her face was both professional and motherly. "What you've brought is heavy," she said. "And it's not all litigable. Some of it is a story. But stories matter in rooms where paper decides. Here's the shape I see." She flipped her legal pad and sketched columns and arrows. TOD deed valid on its face. It's not effective until both your parents pass. It can be challenged on narrow grounds: undue influence, lack of capacity, or fraud. But those are high bars. We count this as future risk, not present remedy. We document context to preserve your options later. Meanwhile, you do not live in that house. You build your foundation. That is strategy 1. She tapped the ledger photocopy. This: if the education fund were a formal trust, we could pursue conversion or breach of fiduciary duty. If it were an informal designation with ledger notes, it's a story. It informs a judge's reading of motives. We capture witnesses to it. Aunt June's testimony is gold, especially with the letter. Mark's statements help. The bank records, if we can get anything, dates, memos, and notations, would be very helpful. You said Mark has a branch contact. He texted me last night. I said, he can bring me in tomorrow. Good, she said. We go fishing for purpose lines in old transactions. Sometimes they write vehicle and think it's neutral. It isn't when we marry it to your grandmother's intent. She leaned back, pen still. Do you feel safe from retaliation? Any threats? Nothing explicitly physical, I said. But my mother went to the school twice. She tried the pediatrician. She posted in the neighborhood group. The tone has shifted from smug to... I searched for a word that was true, but not melodramatic, calculating. Okay, Tasha said. We keep it civil court for now. But if their behavior escalates, we're not far from a harassment prevention order. You have the logs. Keep your responses in writing and brief. A sentence is a unit of self-respect. She wrote on her pad, C&D letter, school letterhead. Confirm pediatrician, confirm bank records, notarized witness statement. Mrs. W. grandmother letter copy, ledger copy, timeline. Then she drew a square around a phrase, preemptive CPS packet. I must have made a face because she lifted a hand. I don't want to alarm you, but I've worked these matters long enough to know the next move for people like your parents, when charm fails, is to raise concerns with Child Protective Services. When that happens, it's often about control, not safety. The best way to meet it is with AIR. You compile what you've already compiled and add proof of schooling, pediatrician records, up-to-date, a lease application in process, passwords, and security protocols in place. You hand that to a social worker with your calm voice if they ever knock. They will see that you are protecting your children, not hiding. Most of the time, that stops a manufactured narrative in its tracks. The room hummed. The tissue box glowed faintly in my peripheral vision, like a lighthouse I didn't need to row toward. Okay, I said. Okay. Finally, she said softer. Write your own will. Choose a guardian. Make a healthcare proxy. A simple power of attorney for someone you trust. Your friend Sarah seems like a good candidate if she's willing. These documents aren't about fear. They're about putting the pen in your hand. You've lived in a world where other people wrote your fate in margins. We end that. I nodded, the kind of nod that happens when your spine recognizes its weight. Ready to start? She asked. Yes, I said. The word felt like a lever. She clicked her pen and worked, drafting a boundary letter that was polite enough to be read in court and sharp enough to be understood. It said in part, all decisions regarding Noah Parker and Lily Parker's schooling and medical care are made by their mother, Emily Parker. Any attempts to contact these institutions on their behalf without Emily Parker's express written consent constitute interference with parental responsibilities and will be documented as such. All communication moving forward should be in writing to P.O. Box. She printed 2 copies and slid them to me. You'll mail one certified, keep one for your binder, she said. Do not text this. Do not hand deliver. Paper wants stamps. She called Principal Hart, then put her on speaker with my nod. Principal Hart, she said crisp. This is Tasha from Legal Aid with Emily Parker's permission. We'd like a brief letter on letterhead confirming your password policy, the attempted pickup incidents, and that the Children's Day proceeded without disruption. We are not escalating. This is for our file. Principal Hart, who had built her career on standing in doorways, said she'd have it by the end of the day. Tasha left a similar voicemail for Mr. Alvarez. Courts love letterhead, she'd said, and I believed her because I had watched judges once in a traffic court, and their faces changed with paper. We scheduled a follow-up. She handed me a checklist, each bullet like a rung. You're building a ladder, she said, echoing the metaphor that had been writing itself in me. And it's not to climb back into their house, it's to climb out of their shadow. At the doorway, she paused. Emily, she said softer, you're doing an extraordinary job. That may not feel like a legal statement. It is. Judges read posture as much as paper. Your posture is steady. Keep it. I carried the binder to the parking lot like a newborn. The afternoon had that blue that makes edges sharper curbs stop signs the seam where buildings meet sky. In the car, I texted Sarah boundary letter drafted. Third-party letters coming. Preemptive CPS packet. Bank tomorrow. She replied with a gif of a woman in a cape, and then words, I'm downstairs with a stamp if you need one. I laughed. Of course she was. I drove to the post office. The lobby smelled like boxes and possibility. I sent both letters certified, one to my parents' address, one to their P.O. box because I have learned to be thorough. The clerk slid me receipts with tracking numbers like thin official deadlines. I tucked them into the upstairs binder third-party tab. On the way out, my phone buzzed. Ms. Cole. FYI. Your mother came back with Brian. They tried to bring cupcakes for Noah's class. We enforced the policy. When asked for the password, your mother said, see, something. We smiled and said, that's not the password. They left. We filed the incident report. Kids are fine. Noah told a joke about seahorses being horses in water. I leaned against the sun-warmed brick and let the laugh out in a single sharp burst. The pattern had tried again. The gate held. Driving back to the motel, I replayed Tasha's words. Write your will, make your proxy, and felt a new thought arrive, and ask for a chair I can choose who stands with me in rooms that matter. Not out of rebellion, out of adulthood. Sarah met me in the parking lot with stamps and a thermos. I knew you'd need both, she said. We sat on a curb and passed the thermos like teenagers breaking rules under bleachers, except the only rules we were breaking were the ones I was born into. I told her about the CPS packet. She didn't blanch. We'll make a binder within the binder, she said. I'll add photos from the apartment complex. Kids on swings, Pepper being fat and lawful. Judges like cats, she added deadpan, and I snorted coffee. Bank tomorrow with Mark, I said. We're looking for purpose lines. Bring me, she said. I won't go in, but I'll sit in the lobby. It helps to know someone is there who will drive you for French fries after, regardless of the outcome. That evening, I picked up the kids from school. Principal Hart handed me an envelope with letterhead and a smile. The kids were magnificent, she said. Lily drew a mermaid who looked suspiciously like Ms. Cole. Noah explained what a password policy is to a boy who tried to leave with a coach. We're good here. In the car, Lily held the letter like a treasure map. Is this our upstairs paper? It is, I said. One of many. Back at the motel, we ordered a pizza because paperwork requires calories, and the day had asked me for all of mine. While the kids argued amiably about topping distribution, I spread the new letters on the bed school pediatrician boundary. I slid them into their sleeves. The sound was the same shushing whisper from the apartment's cat's tail. Agreeing. At 7, Aunt June knocked. She wore lipstick the color of berries and held a manila folder like a baby. I found this, she said. Your grandmother's letter had a second page. tucked behind a hymn. She pulled it out gently and laid it on the bedspread. The ink was faded, but the sentences were confident. Emily, if anyone tells you to get smaller to fit a room, find a room with bigger windows. Money was set aside with your name on it. If a man says it's his, you ask to see the paper and the kindness. If he has neither, you take your tide and go. I didn't know you could cry like a person drinking water. It felt that way, like my body said finally. And yes. June squeezed my hand. I'll say it under oath, she said. I'll say it in the grocery store. I'll shout it at the 4th of July parade. I held your grandmother's breath for too long. I'm exhaling now. After she left, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. The bank manager can see us at 8:30 a.m. Moved it forward. Bring a letter, a ledger copy, and a calm face. He owes me a favor and a fishing lure. I set the alarm for an hour that would make my future self swear, and texted Sarah Bank at 8:30 East Branch. She replied with a thumbs up and a photo of a cooler. I'll bring breakfast. And pretzels, for luck. Sleep came in the shape of lists, but not the frantic kind. The kind sailors write before crossing a bay they have learned to respect. The bank's lobby the next morning had that corporate neutral smell of carpets designed not to offend. We arrived 5 minutes early. Sarah pressed a packet into my hand, copies of everything clipped and labeled. Even if the printer jams, she said, you have paper. Mark waved from a chair, one leg crossed over the other, hat in his lap, face the exact shade of watchful. Emily, he said, standing. Ready. The manager, a man with a tie that tried too hard, shook Mark's hand, the way people do when they owe him a favor, and then offered me a seat in a glass-walled office that made privacy feel pretend. Ms. Parker, he said, I understand you're looking for historical records regarding a family account. There are limits to what I can share. But if you can provide account numbers or dates. I slid the letter and ledger copy forward, careful not to push like a supplicant. My grandmother kept a ledger. She died. I named the year. She set aside money for my education in the account referenced here. I tapped the neat numbers in her hand. Within, I named the span. Years significant withdrawals were made. I believe one financed a vehicle for my brother. I am not seeking to sue your bank. I am seeking a letter stating dates of transfer and any available memos regarding the purpose. He put on reading glasses. He read. He removed the glasses and looked at Mark with a small shake of the head that read like, you weren't wrong. He typed, banks have keyboards that make a particular clack like money pretending to be rain. I can confirm an account existed in your name with your grandmother as custodian, he said carefully. I can confirm that on date, funds were transferred to an account in your parents' names. The memo line, if any, is not visible on my screen without a subpoena. I can, however, provide a letter confirming dates and the fact of transfer. Please, I said. My voice did not crack. On bank letterhead. He printed. The printer jammed on the first try like it had heard Sarah's prophecy and wanted to audition. He cursed under his breath, cleared it, and printed again. The paper slid out like it had been born to be a page. He signed with a pen that probably cost more than my grocery bill and handed it to me. I am not taking a side, he said defensively. You don't have to, I said. Paper has its voice. We walked out with a letter that said what happened when I was 19, in a language money had to admit. In the parking lot, Mark took his hat off and rubbed his forehead like an old man blessing a field. You did that, he said, pointing at the page. Not me. You. Sarah handed me a pretzel. For luck, she said. For salt. By 9:30, I had scanned the bank letter into the upstairs file from the library branch across the street. By 10, I'd emailed it to Tasha with the subject line, bank confirmation date plus transfer. She replied in 8 minutes. This is excellent. We add to the context package. We are not swinging it like a bat. We are laying it like a foundation. At noon, a voicemail from Mr. Alvarez, letter on letterhead ready. Also, this is sideways, but your mother called to ask whether vaccination schedules could be sped up to accommodate a trip. We told her no information without a password. We logged it. We are on your team. At 1, Principal Hart emailed the requested letter. It used words like policy and incident and no exceptions and ended with, "The children returned to class. They were safe and smiling." I printed that twice, one for the binder, one to tape to the inside of my skull. At 2, Tasha called. "Ready for the next uncomfortable thing?" she asked. "We need to think about a civil harassment prevention order if this continues. Not because you are scared, because you are done. The standard is a course of conduct that seriously alarms and serves no legitimate purpose. We're close. We're not there yet, but we're collecting the squares. If they knock, we want to hand the court a quilt." I swallowed. "Okay," I said. "I will not be afraid of words." "Good," she said, "because words are what got you here, and words will get you out." That afternoon, I took Noah and Lily to the apartment again because rituals are how children learn what's true. Adam met us with a folded document, conditional approval. "Keys Monday," he said, formal even when he was grinning. "Pepper tried to sleep in the empty closet yesterday, which is how I know you're supposed to live here." The kids ran to the windows like they had rehearsed. Noah pointed and said, "There's a tree that looks like a seahorse." Lily said, "There's a cloud that looks like upstairs." We left the binder on the kitchen counter empty behind it, light in front. Leaving it there felt like planting a flag. Then I picked it up again because flags can be stolen, and this one had plastic sleeves that whispered, "Protect me." On the drive back to the motel, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A neighbor I hadn't spoken to in months. "Hey Emily, my doorbell camera caught your parents and Brian carrying boxes upstairs the day before you left." I thought it was odd then. Time-stamped. "If you need it, I can send the clip." I pulled over, watched 30 seconds of video in which my family's backs were turned on them, and saved it in 3 places. A small twist, physical proof clicked into the lock we had been shaping with words. At dusk, I sat on the edge of the motel bed and laid the day out like a set table boundary letter, school letter, pediatrician, letter bank, letter neighbor video. The CPS packet tab is half built, waiting for a lease page with a move-in date Monday. The will and proxy forms were printed blank yet, but with spaces that would soon carry the names of people who had earned them. I thought about the basement. I thought about the attic. I thought about the house on the hill that had never been mine, and the upstairs with light, that we had claimed with signatures and muffins and passwords and traffic-signed kindness. I thought about my grandmother's letter. "If anyone tells you to get smaller to fit a room," the sentence didn't end anymore. Not with apology, not with good enough. It ended with a doorknob in my hand. The phone buzzed again. "My mother at last. We received your letter. This is unnecessary. Family matters are private. We are disappointed." I typed the truth, simple and not for argument. "All communication in writing to the P.O. Box. Please do not contact the school or pediatrician. We will document any further attempts." I hit send. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then nothing. Silence can be a truce. It can also be a reloading. Either way, my binder didn't blink. Noah padded out of the bathroom with wet hair and a towel like a cape. "Are we safe?" he asked. Not because he doubted, but because it's a ritual now, and rituals are anchoring. "We are," I said. "We have paper." He looked at the binder like it was armor and nodded gravely. Lily climbed into my lap and asked if our new house would have a yellow light. "Yes," I said, already knowing which curtains I would choose. "Yes." After they slept, I filled in the top line of my will, "I, Emily Parker." The pen didn't shake. I wrote Sarah's name as proxy. I wrote Aunt June as guardian if something happened to me, and Noah and Lily needed someone to say their names in rooms where names are currency. I left the house that wasn't mine, out of the document the way you leave a stain out of a packing box, you don't take it with you. I closed the binder. The plastic whispered. The AC hummed in the same key the courthouse steps had hummed in my memory. Paper steps, windows, altar ladder, door. The last thing I did before turning out the light was to tape a small piece of paper to the inside of the binder cover. A fortune cookie slip we'd cracked open 2 nights ago. A quiet plan is still a plan. I wrote underneath in my neatest teacher writing, Monday keys. Then I lay back and let the room go dark, and the last thing I saw was the silhouette of my children sleeping in a place that was not the basement, not the attic, not the shadow of a surname. Upstairs was out there. Upstairs was a word we had turned into a map. Upstairs was coming with the morning. At 9:02 a.m., the tracking number turned green, delivered. 2 certified letters, one to my parents' mailbox, one to their P.O. box arrived. 10 seconds later, my phone lit up like a short circuit. A voicemail from my father, 2 from my mother. A text that said simply, Emily, family matters are private, in the kind of brittle formality people reach for when they've just felt a door close and don't like the shape of the frame. I didn't answer. Calm is armor. I opened my binder on the motel desk and slid the postal receipts into a sleeve, the plastic shushing like I got you. The boundary letter Tasha wrote was polite enough to be framed and sharp enough to draw blood, if you ran your finger along its edge. All decisions regarding Noah Parker and Lily Parker's schooling and medical care are made by their mother, Emily Parker. Any attempts to contact these institutions on their behalf without Emily Parker's express written consent constitute interference. All communication moving forward should be in writing to P.O. Box. Under it, clipped, sat the second letter, Notice of Retrieval. Dates, window, Saturday 10 a.m., noon. Purpose: collect Noah and Lily's personal property with a civil standby present. It was a schedule written like a liturgy. I called the non-emergency line the night before, had practiced the words in the bathroom mirror like a monologue I didn't want to improvise. The dispatcher had a kind voice that sat low in the chest. We can do a civil standby, she said. 2 officers will be present. They won't arbitrate ownership. They'll keep the peace while you remove belongings that are the children's. Make a list. Work fast. Be clear. Be clear. I can do clear. I have been clear for other people's children for 10 years. This is the assignment, this is the due date, this is how you'll know you've done it right. I sat on the motel carpet and wrote an inventory with Noah on one side and Lily on the other. He listed books in alphabetical order and then looked embarrassed, and then didn't cross them out because the order soothed him. Lily drew pictures, Teddy with a crown mermaid nightlight, with lashes, blanket with stars, the dots marching in neat little lines. I wrote next to each item where it had lived in the house because specificity is another kind of safety. At 9:11 a.m., my father's second voicemail arrived. You sent us a lawyer's letter. Are you out of your mind? He tried to chuckle, and the sound snapped halfway down his throat. This is not how family behaves. Come over and talk like an adult. I looked at my grandmother's letter on the desk, the one where she wrote, If anyone tells you to get smaller to fit a room, you find a room with bigger windows. I said to the room. I am talking like an adult. My reply to my parents was exactly 3 sentences typed and sent to the P.O. Box address because paper wants stamps. I acknowledge receipt of your messages. For the avoidance of doubt, I will retrieve Noah and Lily's personal property on Saturday between 10 a.m. and noon with a civil standby present. All future communication should be in writing to the P.O. Box. Send, breathe. Sarah texted from the parking lot. I brought highlighters, tape, and muffins. Is it weird that civil standby makes me want to organize a parade? I met her by the hood of the Honda. She handed me a blueberry muffin and a roll of blue painter's tape. For labeling, she said. Nothing says not yours like a strip of tape with a kid's name on it. We went over the plan one more time like people rehearsing a fire drill. Mark would meet us at 9:50 on the street, not in the driveway. Aunt June would stand with the officers because she has a talent for stillness that makes other people tell on themselves. Sarah would hang back by the sidewalk with a tote bag and a thermos and a camera she wouldn't lift unless someone tried to rewrite the scene. I would go straight to the basement, pull what was ours, and not climb the stairs unless something I needed had been dragged up. At 10:04, my phone buzzed on the desk. Ms. Cole's text. Your mother tried again at drop-off. Password C something. We smiled. That's not the password. She left. Noah rolled his eyes like he was 50. Incident logged. I sent a heart reaction and imagined Ms. Cole at the front desk receiving muffins like a knight receives a medal. At 10:22, Mr. Alvarez left a voicemail in his steady caramel voice. For your documentation, your mother called about updating vaccination schedules for a trip. We requested the password. She declined. No information given. We added the note to the chart. For a moment, I saw the outline of a shadow that had been moving behind the scenes the whole time a trip. Passports. Birth certificates somewhere safe. The small hairs on my arms stood up and then lay flat when I remembered the order confirmations from vital records in my folder and the credit freezes I'd set that first motel night. We had air where people wanted to put a bag over our heads. That evening, a text from Adam at the apartment complex: I can hold the upstairs storage room for your boxes over the weekend if you need it. Pepper approves. He inspected it and yawned. I thanked him and stared for a long beat at the word upstairs, the way it made my shoulders drop like a piano had been set gently on the ground, instead of being carried an inch above it for years. Saturday came. The motel alarm chirped. Noah made a sign for the boxes with his serious black marker, Noah's, do not throw away. Lily colored in the O, so it looked like a rising sun. I packed the Honda to its polite brim and slid the inventory list into the glove compartment the way people tuck a map into the car door before crossing a state line. We left early. A civil standby isn't a hard appointment, the dispatcher had warned me. Traffic happens, arrests happen. Emergencies outrank retrieval. But at 9:57, a squad car rolled to the curb like the plan had read the same clock I had. Two officers stepped out. One woman with a kind, precise face hair pulled tight. One man with a calm looseness in his stance that said he'd rather talk than roar. They introduced themselves as Officer Green and Officer Patel and asked to see my ID in the letter. I handed them the binder and watched their faces pass over the page's letterhead stamps dates. The way bodies settle when paper is in order will never not feel like a small miracle. What's the goal today? Officer Green asked. Retrieve my children's belongings, I said. No arguments, no shouting, no upstairs. Just their things. She nodded. We'll keep the peace. We can't arbitrate ownership. But if someone tries to stop you from taking the children's property, we'll explain the law. Mark pulled up hat-low eyes steady. Aunt June wore her berry lipstick like a dare. Sarah hung back under a maple tree and lifted her thermos in a small mock toast. Team upstairs, she mouthed. I smiled without showing teeth. We walked. The front door was open, my mother's version of theatrics. She stood inside with her arms crossed, pearl studs in her ears, a sweater the exact color of frost. My father sat in his recliner with the paper folded to a stabbing point. Brian leaned against the banister like he had purchased gravity. Officer Patel spoke first, neutral in tone. Morning. Ms. Parker is here to retrieve her children's belongings. We'll be here to keep this civil. He said civilly like it belonged to both of us. My mother made a sound that was half laugh, half scrape. This is absurd. We would have given her anything reasonable if she'd asked like a person, instead of mailing us threats like a... She stopped at the look on Officer Green's face. We're here now, Officer Green said evenly. Let's get it done. My father didn't stand. He didn't have to. He had spent a lifetime building a throne that didn't require his legs. You're embarrassing yourself, he said to me like he was offering a towel. You bring police into a family house. I'm bringing boundaries, I said. I'm here for Noah and Lily's things. Brian smirked, eyes flicking up and down me like a scan at a store. You're making a scene. He sounded pleased like a boy who had finally coaxed a cat from under the porch just to prove he could. I didn't take the bait. Basement, I said to Officer Green. She nodded. We moved. The basement smelled like concrete and last summer's damp. Boxes lined the wall labeled in my mother's careful hand in black marker seasonal kitchen. Brian's memories. My kids' things were in a section off to the side, stacked haphazardly, a collage of color that made my chest burn. I pulled the first box. It was heavier than it should have been. Inside, Lily's stuffed animals mashed together like a crowd at a door. Noah's books on ecosystems, a jar of marbles, the quilt my grandmother made with her old blouses stitched into a geography of tenderness. Lily's drawing of the blanket had been right stars lined up. I folded it carefully and slid it into the car first. Noah's books stacked into the crate like they were finding each other after a separation. I used Sarah's painter's tape on the outside of each box, Noah Lily, upstairs. I looped the tape over itself so the words made a small flag. 15 minutes in, we had established a rhythm. I pointed. Mark lifted, Officer Patel held the door. Aunt June made a list as if the pen were a wand. I avoided the stairs. I avoided the West Room where I knew the beds had been made with clean sheets and someone else's name stamped invisible into the pillowcase. I was labeling a box of Lego sets when a manila folder slid halfway out from under a plastic bin. It shouldn't have caught my eye, but I've been a teacher long enough to know the look of a folder that wants to be found. It was stamped with the blue of the post office and the words, Passport Appointment Child, in the top right corner. Under it, 2 forms with my children's names typed neatly, and someone else's handwriting filling in the blanks. A sticky note on the front. Wednesday, 3 p.m. Bring birth certificates. Somewhere safe. I didn't gasp. I didn't give them that. I slid my phone from my back pocket and took 3 photos in quick succession. Officer Green nearby saw. Her eyes flicked to mine and softened. You can add that to your documentation, she said. Not loud, not conspiratorial. If you have concerns about attempted travel without consent, call your legal aid. They'll walk you through the notification process. She looked at the folder again. You prepared? I nodded. I did. We filled the Honda to the corners. It looked like a family had been peeled off a wall and placed into a trunk. On the last trip, I grabbed Lily's nightlight, the mermaid one that projects slow waves on the ceiling, and wedged it between a box of books and a bag of socks. As I turned, I caught my father's eye over the banister. For a second, and only a second, he looked small. Not contrite, not transformed. Just human-sized, the way men sometimes look when they realize the room they built isn't holding them the way they imagined. You'll regret this, my mother said at my shoulder, voice low and certain like a weather report. It was the same line she'd used the night we left, the one that had sounded like a spell. It didn't sound like magic anymore. It sounded like someone trying to talk a storm back into a cloud. Officer Patel stepped between us without touching either of us. We're done here, he said. Ms. Parker has what she came for. Brian couldn't help himself. We were going to put the kids back upstairs after the trip, he blurted, and my mother's head snapped toward him like a whip. Officer Green's pen moved once, a quick check mark on a small pad. June didn't blink. Mark took off his hat and smoothed the brim like the next move had been made for him. We walked out. The air outside tasted different, brighter, like a metal warmed by the sun. Sarah met me on the curb and didn't say, "Are you okay?" she said. "Do you want the front seat, or do you want to ride in the back with the boxes?" Because she knows me. I wanted the back. I wanted to sit between the crate of books and the bag labeled Lily Shoes, and imagine the apartment, our apartment, with these very objects arranged not as evidence but as home. At the apartment complex, Adam propped open the storage room and Pepper the black cat inspected every box like he was customs. "Approved," Sarah said in a fake British accent, and Lily, who had been very serious all morning, laughed in that hiccuping way that can undo even the most fortified heart. I labeled each shelf with tape. Noah books, Lily cozy, blankets, lamp, nightlight. A shelf at the top I labeled ocean and slid my grandmother's quilt there because I had decided in that second that it was an ocean in textile form and that we'd unfold it on our floor. When we shut the storage door, I felt a click inside. Not a slam, a settled hinge. Back at the motel, I made 3 calls. First to Tasha. We did the retrieval, I said, and told her about the folder, the sticky note, and the birth certificates. Her voice went professional and protective at the same time. Good catch. I'll draft a letter to the passport office noting that authorization from only one parent is invalid in your case, without proof of sole legal custody, which you do not have and they do not have. You'll also file a DS 5V525 statement if they try to claim exigent circumstances. For now, scan me the photos. Do not accuse. Document. Also, given the trip talk at school and this folder, we're adding this to our future petition as an attempted interference. We aren't swinging for a restraining order today, but the squares are sewing themselves. Okay, I said. Also, thank you. Keep breathing, she said. You're doing exactly what a judge wants to see. Protect, not punish. Second, call the non-emergency line to log the standby and the lack of incident beyond a documented attempt at a passport application. The dispatcher took the report like a person filing a bead into a larger pattern. Third, vital records. I'd like to reconfirm the contact note on my children's files, I said. The clerk read it back. Mother only. Password upstairs. And I held the phone away for 1 second to swallow a sound of relief that tried to be bigger than the room. By afternoon, the upstairs team thread had 3 new messages. Principal Hart attached a scanned incident report from the day before with the line unauthorized, attempted delivery of food items at lunchtime. Password policy enforced. Mr. Alvarez sent a photo of his office letterhead note and added, "Tell Noah the science fair topic list is out. I'd like to recommend ocean currents." Aunt June texted a photo of a manila folder with a sticky note that said, WED 3 p.m. in my mother's hand, because she had the kind of eyes that see details and put them in her pocket. At 4, a message popped up from an unknown number. It was Mrs. Whitaker, the notary. "Dropping this in your mailbox, dear," she wrote. "It's my notary log, a copy. It lists the date and time of the deed notarization and my notes, grantors together. Wrote practical in small talk. No mention of daughter. Boy Brian retrieved a copy later with a whiskey gift. Declined. Perhaps useful. If not, it will keep you company." At 5, the neighbor who had sent me the doorbell clip wrote, "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I typed back what I wished someone had said to me years ago. You are saying something now. That's enough." The pressure shift wasn't loud. It didn't come with a slam or a scream or a siren. It came in small sounds, plastic tape ripping a printer catching, and then clearing a cat's faint approving trill, the click of a storage room lock. It was the hum of a civil standby engine idling at the curb while you carry your life up from a basement 1 box at a time. That night, the kids spread the quilt on the motel carpet like a picnic. We sat on it with Chinese takeout and paper fortunes. Noah said, "You will navigate by stars." Lily said, "Your home will be bright." Mine said, "The thing you feared has already happened. Lev." After they fell asleep, I opened the binder again and slid in printed photos of the passport folder. The new logs, the incident report, the thank you note I wrote to Officer Green and Officer Patel that I'd mail on Monday because gratitude is also part of record keeping. I added a tab, passport, interference. I wrote in my neatest teacher's hand, attempted appointment scheduled, no consent, documents recovered, legal aid notified, letter to State Department pending. Then, because the day had earned it, I let myself remember the one small twist I hadn't told anyone yet. At the bottom of one of the boxes, under a jumble of socks, I'd found my ocean book, the one I wanted when I was 9. I don't know if my grandmother put it there years ago, because she knew I'd need to find it like a message in a bottle, or if someone had knocked it off a shelf and the universe placed it under my hands today on purpose. The inscription was in her looping script, "For Emily, so she can have her tied." I lay back on the bed with the book open on my chest and let the motel AC blow the page corners into tiny waves. The map of currents looked like handwriting. The arrows pointed, the legend explained. A system larger than me, predictable and wild at the same time, orchestrated by a moon you can't touch but can trust. My phone buzzed once more. A text from my mother. You humiliated us today. We would have given you everything if you hadn't involved strangers. I typed slowly, deliberately, the way you do when you are writing under oath to your future. I retrieved my children's belongings. We are moving on Monday. All future communication in writing to the P.O. box. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then nothing. A truce of absence. Or a reload. Either way, my door was not theirs to walk through anymore. Sunday morning, Adam slid an envelope under the motel door. Keys with a smiley face drawn by someone who believed in marker magic. Early pickup is fine, his note said. Pepper approves. See you upstairs. I showed Noah and Lily, and we stood there for a full minute like a small family at a museum, looking at a painting that explains something you've been trying to say your whole life. We did the first thing, Noah said solemnly. The first big thing. We did, I said. We made a scene on paper. He laughed and rolled his eyes at my teacher joke and climbed onto the bed and flopped onto his back like a boy who trusts the surface will hold. Before we left to sign and pick up the keys, I packed the binder last. I slid my grandmother's letter into the very front in front of the boundary letter, and the school log, and the bank's admission, and the passport photos. I pressed the cover down and held it for a breath, like a person closing a door on a house she once loved, and now knows how to leave without mythology. The first pressure move wasn't a punch. It was a posture. It was a Saturday morning with officers whose names I learned and thanked. It was a woman not shouting in a hallway she didn't build, and a man who had always leaned on banisters revealing the trip he planned without foreseeing the counter-signature the world would require. It was a cat approving, a quilt unfolding, a binder swallowing paper like light. It was the sound the latch made on the storage room click not bang when we slid Noah's books and Lily's nightlight into a space with a label that said what we had been saying out loud to each other all week. Upstairs. At 8:03 a.m. on the morning we carried our lives up one flight of stairs, there was a knock at the door of a place that finally belonged to us. Not Pepper's scratch-paw knock, not a neighbor's hello. A flat, precise knock that sounded like paperwork. Delivery for Emily Parker, the man said, holding a stiff envelope with my name in block letters and a return address from a law firm 2 towns over. I signed. I didn't open it, not yet. I set it on the counter beside a chipped mug and a single houseplant the last tenant forgot its leaves leaning toward the window like it believed in light, no questions asked. Mom, Noah asked already barefoot on the kitchen tile, eyes bright hair sticking up like he'd been plugged into the socket of hope. Can I measure where the bookshelf goes? Please, I said. Chief cartographer, your moment. Lily spun in the living room so the hem of her shirt fanned out. The windows are real, she announced as if she had finally reached land and wanted the lighthouse records updated. I smiled at them first. Then I slit the envelope. The letter was a careful threat dressed in courtesy. Cease, it read, regarding defamatory statements I was allegedly spreading about my parents, a reminder that grandparent visitation rights might be pursued. An accusation that I had removed property beyond the scope of what was reasonable during the retrieval. How many socks were reasonable, it did not say. And finally, a line that wanted to sound concerned. Our clients remain open to a family resolution provided you discontinue your campaign. I set the pages down and looked at the only campaign that mattered. Noah crouched by the wall, penciling a line of painter's tape at the exact height of his shoulder, eyes narrowed in concentration. Lily pressed both palms to the glass and fogged it with breath to draw a sun. I felt the old fear flare, the one that says, go quiet, be small. Then the newer thing I had been growing took its place. Calm is armor. Paper is voice. I texted the letter to Tasha and put the envelope under the plant to stop anything from blowing away. Okay, I said to the room, my voice steady. Let's go upstairs. We did. We hung a string of paper stars over Lily's bed and they caught the morning in small squares. Noah arranged his books in a pattern only he understood: science maps, then stories, because that was how his brain liked its roads. I labeled drawers and plugged in lamps, and discovered that a house-sized breath is what happens when you put a nightlight on a wall with no history. At 9:22, Tasha called. I saw the letter, she said. Breathe. This is standard saber rattling. They said visitation. I said not because I feared it would happen, but because the word curled around my throat, the way certain nouns can, when you've lived too long inside other people's rules. Visitation is a legal process, Tasha said. It requires standing clean hands and a judge who believes the children will benefit. Interference, premeditation, attempted manipulation at school, none of that helps them. We will not respond in kind. I'll draft a short reply that says, all further communication in writing. False statements will be addressed in the appropriate forum. We won't swing at shadows. And the property accusation? She chuckled not unkindly. You retrieved children's belongings under a civil standby. SOX do not require subpoenas. Keep receipts if you buy anything new. Keep doing what you're doing. She paused. I'm more interested in the timeline. There's a hearing date in 2 weeks for the harassment order if we choose to file. Part 8 of your life, she added softly. Surprising me. Storm before the court. Expect the weather. Understood, I said, and looked at the plant leaning toward the window, like it knew storms were a season, not a sentence. By 10, Sarah arrived with coffee screwdrivers and an energy that makes electrical outlets behave. Where do you want shelves? She asked. Where do you want secrets? Where do you want to stand when you talk yourself brave? Windows, I said. Always windows. She handed me a mug and opened a toolbox the size of a suitcase. Also, the PTA mom sent muffins to the front office again. Ms. Cole called to ask if she should refrigerate gratitude. I told her to eat one immediately. We operate on a muffin standard now. I laughed because it was either that or cry, and laughing seemed better. There's a letter, I said, tilting my head toward the counter. Sarah read. Her shoulders tensed, then lowered. We knew this was coming. Tasha's on it. She is. Good. She folded the paper the way people fold menus when they're done deciding and slid it under the plant. Then we get back to building. We assembled a bed frame. We discovered that the screws in the tiny plastic bag were both too many and exactly enough. We put a rug down and watched how differently light behaves when it lands on something that wants it. At noon, Aunt June knocked 2 sharp raps that contained their punctuation. She stood in the doorway holding a casserole and a manila folder, like an aunt who might run toward a fire, carrying both water and the family tree. I won't stay long, she said. You have a nest to build. But I brought lasagna because revolution burns calories, and I brought this because you'll need it. She tapped the folder. Credit union schedule. It's not a 529, not formally, but there was a savings set aside for your children 2 years ago in your mother's name, earmarked Grandchildren Education. 2 months ago, the beneficiary line was crossed out and rewritten with Matthew's name. The teller printed me the maintenance log when I told her it was for a school project, and I am not ashamed. The room went quiet in the way rooms do when an old story changes its shape in your hands. I took the printout. There in black and white the crossed-out letters of my children's names. Underneath Matthew in a handwriting I'd recognize on index cards and birthday tags and house rules newsletters. Thank you, I said, and the words were too small. June touched my cheek with the knuckles of her fingers the way my grandmother used to. Get those shelves up, she said. And if they knock, you keep the chain on. After she left, Noah pointed at the page. They crossed us out, he said. Not with devastation, with the specific indignation of a 10-year-old who understands ledger lines. Put it in the binder, Mom, under not ours anymore. And then put our books on the shelf. They can't cross those out. I slid the page into a sleeve labeled Context. I added a bright tab, Beneficiary Change. Then I watched my son alphabetize without apology, and I thought, this is why we do paper. Paper is the slow knife that cuts clean. At 1, Adam knocked and introduced our downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Patel Silverbun, a soft cardigan and a keychain with a tiny elephant. I heard small feet, she said, smiling, and I came with cookies because that is the law. She set a plate on the counter and lowered her voice. If anyone strange comes around, we have a group text. People look out for each other here. It's not gossip, it's defense. Thank you, I said, and meant it in the way that includes things that cannot be put into words. She patted Lily's hair, complimented Noah's map, and left us with coconut macaroons and a sense that the building itself was alert. We took an hour to do nothing on purpose. We lay on the living room floor, heads toward the window, feet pointed at the door, and watched leaves move. Lily said the wind looked like Braille. Noah muttered longitude and latitude like an incantation. I let my chest rise and fall and counted the times my shoulders wanted to jump and didn't. At 2, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go. Then I answered. Emily. The voice was careful, like a person stepping onto a dock with a sleeping baby. It's Maya. We met once briefly. She hesitated. I'm Matthew's mom. I sat up. Hi, I said, and my voice came out softer than I intended. I remember. I heard you moved, she said. Congratulations. That's the right word, right? It should be. It is, I said. Thank you. She exhaled. I'm not calling to stir anything. I'm calling because I know how this family works. I have texts. A pause. From your mother. From Brian. Plans. Promises. Some of them mention your kids. I didn't know what to do with them before. I think I do now. There was a sound in her voice, a scrape of dignity, maybe like metal finding metal. Can I send them? She asked. You don't have to respond. Just hold them. Please, I said. The screenshots came in batches. My phone is filled with blue and gray bubbles, dates at the top, battery percentages at the edges, God in the details. We'll do it while she's at work. Boys upstairs. The fund is better used on a boy. My mother's text, a sentence no one should ever type, and yet there it was, unpunctuated, definitive. Another passport appointments are easier if you just make them. A final one, newer, Sarah is unreliable. We need to go around her friends. I felt the room tilt and then steady. Maya, I said when I could speak. Do you want to write a statement? I do, she said. And I want you to know if they come after you, using Matthew as leverage, I won't help. He's a kid. He's not their legacy. He's a person. I wanted to reach through the phone. Thank you, I said. And this time the words were the right size. After I hung up, I sent the screenshots to Tasha with a subject line I knew she would appreciate. Context, but this time with receipts. She responded in minutes. This is strong. We'll ask Maya for a signed statement. We won't swing it right away. We'll let it sit in the file and glow. At 3, the doorbell rang. Not a delivery, not cookies. A very particular ring that sounded like pretend casual. I checked the peephole. My mother pearls. My father posture. Brian leaning against the hallway rail like he'd installed it. I did not open the door. Emily. My mother's voice floated cheerfully toward the painted wood. We brought gifts for the children. You can leave them at the office downstairs, I said, voice even. We don't allow drop-ins. Don't be ridiculous. She laughed. We're family. Mrs. Patel's text pinged before I could answer. Do you want me to call Adam? Or would you like me to stand in the hall with my phone like a lighthouse? Lighthouse, please, I typed back. Thank you. Emily. My father said sterner now. You cannot bar your parents from an apartment you pay for with our good name. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, all communication in writing to the P.O. box. Please do not return uninvited. Brian leaned so close to the peephole that for a second all I could see was the blur of his eye. You're making this worse than it needs to be, he said, and his breath fogged the brass. Sarah, who had silently crossed the room the second the bell rang, handed me her phone with the camera already open. For your record, she mouthed. I hit record not to post, not to threaten, just to keep. Emily. My mother tried again, voice lowering into the tone that used to make my stomach drop. We will be seeking visitation. You are forcing our hand. Put it in writing, I said. And please leave. Silence, then footsteps. Another text from Mrs. Patel. They're leaving the hallway. Adam is walking them down. Pepper escorted. Everything is boring again. I slid down the door and sat on the floor. Sarah slid down next to me. We looked at each other and then at the ceiling. You didn't open the door, she said, and the pride in her voice made my throat burn. You kept the chain on. I did, I said. I let myself shake for 1 minute. Then I stood up because there were curtains to hang and a lasagna to eat, and a daughter who wanted to put stickers on a dresser like constellations. At 4, a voicemail landed from a number I recognized, Mrs. Whitaker. Dear, she said, voice firm. Just to say I saw your parents with that young man in my parking lot. They were discussing visitation and rights. I reminded them that rights are not costumes one can put on for a performance. If you need a statement, I will write one. I smiled at the phone like something you forgive for being a machine. I will, I said into the air. Thank you. We ate at the counter, knees bumping the lasagna. Aunt June made, tasting like a thing earned. Lily put 3 paper stars on the cabinet and announced they were house rules. Rule 1, we sing at breakfast. Rule 2, we say the password to the cat. Rule 3, we only cry a little bit at night when the wind is loud. Approved, I said, stamping the air. After dinner, Noah taped his map above his desk. He drew a red line from the motel to our apartment like a migration. We need a legend, he said. Legend, I repeated. Yes. I wrote red means leaving, yellow means choosing, blue means upstairs. He nodded like I'd said a correct answer on a test I didn't study for, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. He smoothed it on the table. It was the first fortune cookie he'd ever saved. You will navigate by stars. He taped it under the legend like a small, rude compass. At 6, Tasha's reply to Maya's screenshots arrived lawyerly and grateful. We'll prepare a declaration template for Maya to sign. We'll also begin a motion folder if we need it. For now, document your parents' visit today, date time what you said, and that they left when asked. If they return, we'll consider a notice of trespass through the landlord. I texted Adam to let him know what happened and ask about building policy. He responded with a photo of the posted sign downstairs. No soliciting. No uninvited entry. Residents may refuse any visitor. Management will enforce. Under it, Pepper lounged like a seal. Pepper approves, Adam wrote. He enforces by looking disappointed. We took a walk as dusk fell because moving air through a new place invites it to settle. The sidewalk chalk near the playground had a new hopscotch grid. Lily jumped through the squares, landing softly, and shouted, "Upstairs at the final box." Noah climbed the jungle gym and stared out at the parking lot like a sailor reading the shore. I sat on a bench and let my shoulders drop to their rightful height. A woman with a stroller nodded at me. You just moved in, she asked. Today, she smiled. Welcome. People bring soup here when you're sick and mind their business when you're not. Good luck. Thank you, I said. She kept walking. The stroller's wheels made a rhythm that sounded like a metronome easing you into a new song. Back upstairs, the apartment smelled like lasagna and new dust. I made tea and sat at the table with my binder. I added a tab, Visitation Threat Hallway Attempt. I wrote in teacher neatness, 3:00 p.m., uninvited visit, declined entry, referred to writing, neighbor witness present, management escorted. I printed a screenshot of the group text exchange with Mrs. Patel because kindness with timestamps is proof. The cease and desist letter still sat under the plant. I pulled it out and read it again slower. Midway down the page on April 11th, your removal of boxes from the basement, but the standby had been on April 13th. The date was wrong. A small thing, but small things add up. I circled the date and wrote discrepancy in the margin. Paper had its ways of telling on people. At 8, we hung the last set of curtains. Evening settled the soft, honest kind, not the kind that pretends to be peace while it hides knives. Noah read in bed by a clip-on lamp. Lily fell asleep with her ear on the mermaid nightlight's plastic shell, the slow wave motion painting her ceiling in moving teal. I stood in the doorway and let the picture write itself into me rooms that bless children that do not apologize for taking up space. I went to the kitchen to wash 2 plates, because sometimes the mundane is the altar. My phone buzzed with an email. From Brian. Last name. Stop this before it ruins everything. He'd sent the same line before to my motel inbox, but tonight he added a PDF of a family agreement drafted by him on a document template with the word legacy in the header. It assigned rooms and responsibilities to names like a medieval charter. It listed my children's access as temporary and his son's as primary. He CC'd my mother. I read it once. I did not reply. I forwarded it to Tasha. I printed it and slid it into the binder behind the cease and desist. I wrote self-authored agreement. Not legal. Tone ownership. Use for context only. Then, because I am human and had been steadier than anyone has a right to be for an entire day, I leaned my forehead on the cool kitchen cabinet and let 2 tears make their way to my mouth. They tasted like salt and iron and something else, something cleaner. Sarah came in quietly, drying her hands on a towel. She didn't say, "Are you okay?" she said. "Want me to label the breaker box?" "Yes," I said, laughing through the last of the salt. "Please, use your scary neat handwriting." She opened the panel and began to write, living room kitchen, Noah's light, Lily's waves. When she was done, she handed me the marker. "One for you," she said. I wrote Emily Windows. She nodded like a priest. Before bed, I wrote 2 letters, one to the kids sealed and put in the ocean tab to be opened someday when they ask. How did it start? I wrote. It started with a room. It continued with a binder. It was always about you, and it was never about rooms. The second to myself, small and defiant. Do not open the door to people who did not learn to knock kindly. The last thing I did was place my grandmother's letter in a frame on the dresser. If anyone tells you to get smaller to fit a room, find a room with bigger windows. I angled it so my face and the window were both reflected at once. A person and light, not either or. I turned off the lamp. The apartment breathed. In the next room, Noah shifted, and Lily made her small whistling sleep sound. In the courtyard, Pepper yowled at a moth, and then presumably forgave it. My phone buzzed one more time, Tasha efficient even at night. Got the letter. Drafted reply. Tomorrow we request the school's visitor log for the last month times names and notes. Courts love logs. Keep your calm. This is the storm before the hearing. You are the lighthouse, not the ship. I set the phone face down and lay on my back and stared at the rectangle of streetlight on the ceiling. Day 1 in a real place had come with lasagna, a law firm, cookies, a neighbor, a notary, a plant that wanted the sun, a letter that told on itself, a screenshot that said the quiet part out loud, and a closed door I did not open. Before sleep found me, I made a pact with the dark. I would not spend my nights rehearsing other people's lines. My children would not learn to speak in rooms that shrink them. If a storm came, we would not move back into basements to avoid getting wet. We would let the storm pass through and over and around, and in the morning we would check the windows and find them still there, bigger than before holding. I slept. And when I woke, Part 9 had already started writing itself, the courthouse steps in my head, the way a person walks when she knows paper is stacked and names are ready, and her children's beds are upstairs. By 8:11 a.m., the courthouse smelled like pencil shavings and cold marble, the kind of smell that pretends to be neutral. The security line moved in small fits. My binder pressed into my ribs like a second sternum, steadying me every time my hands went light. I could feel the ridge from the plastic spine through my dress. I took it as a reminder I didn't come here empty-handed. ID and any medal, the officer at the scanner said. I placed my keys in the tray, the apartment fob bright as a coin, the P.O. box key dull and loyal. The bin slid through the screen, showed bones and paper clips, and I passed. Tasha waited by the elevator bank, navy blazer flats that could sprint hair pinned with ruthless practicality. She didn't hug me. She squeezed my elbow like a coach. "Good morning, Emily. Breathe." "I am," I said. It was almost true. We rode to the third floor. The hallway outside courtroom C was a familiar planet, two benches bolted to tile a water fountain that coughed a bulletin board with notices that made promises in small fonts. A woman in a green cardigan practiced a statement under her breath. A man in a suit argued softly into his phone with a voice I recognized the tone of someone trying to fold reality until it turns into an invitation. "They're here," Tasha murmured. My parents stood near the door, their lawyer between them. My mother had chosen gray today pearls, like punctuation. My father held his posture like a brief. Brian leaned against the wall with a smirk that could start a fire. The lawyer, a thin man whose tie felt like an apology, eyed our binder. His eyes flicked to Tasha's and changed temperature. I kept my gaze past them. Calf, thigh, hip, one breath each. I heard Aunt June before I saw her, the small sound lipstick makes against a coffee lid. She stepped out from behind a column with a nod that felt like a gavel. Sarah swept in a second later, 2 seats of quiet in the row behind ours, saved with a scarf. Mrs. Whitaker in an alto pin and a cardigan that meant business slid in with a folder. Adam had texted at dawn. "Good luck. We'll keep the building quiet and the hall bright. Pepper is on patrol." "Kids?" Tasha asked low. "At school," I said. "Password policy posted at the door." Ms. Cole baked muffins into a shield. Tasha smiled with half her mouth. "Let's do the docket." She talked in the language of maps and steps. "We're first up on the civil harassment calendar. Narrow ask, no contact order limited to you and the children. Prohibition on third-party interference with school medical and passports. No uninvited visits to residents. We are not litigating the house. We are not litigating inheritance. We are not litigating feelings. We are asking for a fence." I nodded. "Fence." She handed me a one-page summary she'd written in a font that calmed me. It had 4 headings: incident history with dates, third-party verifications with bullet points and letterhead names, attempts to circumvent boundaries with visitation threats and hallway drop-in, and risk mitigation passwords. Credit freezes, P.O. box log of calls. At the bottom in her small neat print posture, calm factual brief. No speculation. Let paper talk. The clerk called our case. The courtroom had pews, not chairs, and an altar pretending to be a bench. The judge wore plain glasses and an expression that said she had no time for stories without dates. I respected her immediately. "Parker versus Parker," the clerk said. "Petition for harassment prevention order." We approached. My parents' lawyer announced his name. Tasha announced hers and mine. The judge looked at me first. Not with pity. With that quiet appraisal good teachers use. "What do you know, Miss Parker," she said. "I've read the petition. Start with the most recent events. Then we'll go backward." "Yes, Your Honor," Tasha said. 2 days after Ms. Parker and her children moved into a new residence, the respondents arrived uninvited at her door, with their son demanding access to the children and threatening legal action for visitation. Ms. Parker declined, asked that all communication be in writing, and the respondents remained in the hallway, attempting to persuade her through the door. Neighbors witnessed this, and management escorted them downstairs. Following that, the respondents' counsel sent a cease and desist letter alleging defamation and threatening to pursue visitation if Ms. Parker would not discontinue her campaign. The judge lifted a hand, and before the move, Tasha did not turn a page. She had memorized the spine. 3 days prior, Ms. Parker conducted a civil standby to retrieve her children's belongings from the respondent's basement. During that retrieval, she discovered documentation of a passport appointment scheduled for the children without her knowledge. She photographed the documents and has since notified counsel of the attempt. Before that, multiple attempts were made by the respondents to access the children through their school and pediatrician without Ms. Parker's authorization. The institutions declined and logged the incidents. And before that, I chose my words like careful steps on river stones. While I was at work, I said my parents cleared my children's rooms and moved their belongings to the basement. When I returned, they stated another grandson deserved the best rooms. I left with my children that night. Since then, I have asked that all communication be in writing. They have not honored that. The judge nodded once, a metronome for the room. Show me corroboration. Tasha handed the clerk a bundle. The top sheet was Principal Hart's letter on school letterhead. The judge skimmed, stopped where the policy was described in bold. Password policy observed unauthorized attempt recorded. She turned the page. Mr. Alvarez's signed note dated and time-stamped referencing denied requests about scheduling and trips. The judge made a small mark with her pen, a tick that sounded like agreement. Next, the neighbor's doorbell clip on a flash drive and a still frame printed with the timestamp in the corner. The judge passed it to the clerk without looking up. "Will admit," she said. "And the cease and desist. Let me see the language." Tasha slid it across. "Note the date mismatch regarding the standby, and the tone threat of visitation contingent on discontinuing her campaign," the judge read. Her mouth did not move. She tapped the wrong date with the side of her pen. "Noted," she said. Mrs. Whitaker stepped up when Tasha called her name. Her cardigan seemed to iron the air. She stated her name and profession, and then in careful words described seeing my parents sign a deed 6 months ago and hearing terms like practical and boys at the notary table. "Legal does not mean good," she said and caught herself. "Forgive me, Your Honor, that was an opinion. The facts are in my log." She held up a copy. The judge took it. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker," she said, and spelled it to the clerk like the name mattered. Aunt June followed. She was not there to perform. She told the story of a ledger and a letter found in a Bible cover, and a coffee tin that meant ocean when it said education. She did not cry. I did not either. The judge asked one question. "Do you have the letter?" Tasha handed over the copy with my grandmother's script like tide marks. The judge glanced. She did not linger. She returned it to the file like a shell you pick up and understand without polishing. "And this is Maya?" Tasha said last, and my throat tightened. Maya stood in black, chin up, a hand that trembled only once when she flattened her statement on the witness stand. She stated her relationship with Brian and their son. She said in a voice that confused my sternum, "I have messages from the respondents planning to change rooms while Ms. Parker was at work and referring to her children as temporary. I also have a message that says the boys should hold the upstairs because that's the legacy." I provided screenshots to counsel. "Are those messages in your possession today?" the judge asked. "They are," Maya said. She did not look at Brian. I did not either. The judge received the packet of blue and gray bubbles like a relic. "Thank you," she said. "You may step down." My parents' lawyer stood then with a soft cough that tried to organize the room around him. "Your Honor," he began with respect, "this is a family dispute that spiraled into the theater. My clients made a house adjustment. They regret the distress it caused their daughter. They deny any harassment. The letter was a standard attempt to rein in defamatory statements that Ms. Parker has been making online." "Show me where," the judge said without edge. He shuffled. "Posts in the neighborhood group. Comments about legacy." "Those are your clients," Tasha said, not unkindly, pointing at the print with my mother's lines circled in yellow. My mother's cheeks flushed. My father's jaw clicked. The lawyer tried again. "The respondents love their grandchildren. They are pillars of the community. They only went to the school as doting grandparents." The judge raised her hand 2 fingers. "Intent is not the issue. Contact and interference are." She flipped a page. "I have school logs, medical notes, a planned passport appointment without the mother's knowledge, An uninvited visit to a residence 2 days after moving in, and a letter threatening to seek visitation if Ms. Parker does not stop her campaign. He swallowed. Your Honor, visitation is a right they intend to pursue. Not in this proceeding, she said, and not as leverage. She turned to me. Ms. Parker, do you have sole legal custody? No, I said. I am their mother. Their father is not present in this petition. There is no order regarding the grandparents. Understood, she said. And what is your ask exactly? Tasha didn't need to look down. No contact order prohibiting the respondents from contacting Ms. Parker except in writing. No contact with the children outside mother's consent. No attempts to contact school medical providers or government agencies regarding the children. No uninvited presence at Ms. Parker's residence or workplace. And a note to the Department of State indicating that absent proof of exigent circumstances, passport processing for the minors requires Ms. Parker's consent. The judge looked at my parents. Do you dispute any of the dates in the petitioner's timeline? Do you have your logs? My father spoke for the first time. We did what any family would do, he said. We adjusted rooms. We tried to fix it. She escalated. She brought the police into a home. She made a scene. Sir, the judge said, not unkindly. This is a court. We handle scenes. She looked at the clerk. I'll take a brief recess. In the hall, I leaned against the cool wall tile and let my lungs remember that air is free. Sarah pressed a cup of hallway water into my hand. It tasted faintly like old copper, and something that surprised me, victory may be at 0.02% concentration. You're steady, she said. I'm proud of you. A text buzzed through from Ms. Cole. We just posted tomorrow's field trip policy. Noah says to tell you he volunteered to carry the first aid kit because he is trustworthy weight-bearing. I laughed out loud. The sound startled a man down the hall into smiling. June adjusted my collar like mothers do in old movies. Whatever the judge says, she whispered, you did it the way your grandmother would have approved. Paper first, posture, second voice last. Tasha returned and angled me back toward the doors. 2 more points, she said. If the judge asks whether you will block supervised grandparent time in the future, the answer is, if they comply with boundaries and my children wish to, I will consider it. Today is about safety, not revenge. Tell the truth. Don't volunteer. Let the fence speak. Fence, I repeated, and tasted the word for strength. We took our seats. The judge sat. Her glasses caught the ceiling lights and made 2 small moons. Ms. Parker, she said, I am granting a harassment prevention order for 1 year reviewable. Terms as follows. The respondents shall have no direct contact with you except in writing to the address you provided. They are prohibited from contacting the children without your consent. They shall not contact the school pediatrician or other providers regarding the children, nor attempt to schedule appointments, nor pursue passport applications. They shall not appear at your residence uninvited. Any violations documented by third parties will result in sanctions. My eyes flooded in the quiet, not with spectacle, just with the pressure release when a valve is finally turned. The judge continued, this is not a statement about ultimate family dynamics. It is a practical order responding to a pattern that in my judgment amounts to harassment. I will note the respondent's counsel's letter threatening visitation as leverage. I will also note the planned passport appointment without the mother's consent and the school's and pediatrician's logs. I will not order counseling. This is not that courtroom. But I will say this, if the respondents wish to see these children in the future, compliance with boundaries is the first step, not the last. My mother made a sound, half protest, half tremor. My father touched her wrist. Brian whispered something to their lawyer that made his tie look more foolish. The judge's eyes flicked to them for a second, and then back to me. Ms. Parker, she said, I encourage you to continue to communicate in writing briefly and clearly. If after 6 months the respondents demonstrate compliance, you may consider at your discretion structured contact for the children if they desire it. That is your call, no one else's. She banged the gavel gently like a teacher dismissing class without humiliating anyone. Next case, she said. Tasha didn't whoop. She is not a whooper. She wrote the order number on her palm and nodded at me once permission to feel it. Outside in the hall, my body did a thing I didn't expect. It got very quiet, as if something had unclenched in my spine at last. Breathe, Tasha said again. I did. My parents' lawyer approached. This was unnecessary, he murmured, attempting to be plaintive. We could have. We did, Tasha said. In court. She handed him a card with the P.O. box address printed in clean font. All communication in writing. My mother tried to step around him. June stepped into the space casually, like someone considering the bulletin board. Mrs. Whitaker smiled at the ceiling tiles. Sarah checked her watch. The choreography was kindness and defense both. We took the elevator down. The ride was short, the drop was long. Outside, the morning had warmed into noon. A bus sighed at the curb. Someone across the street sold empanadas from a cart, and the smell made my knees nearly give from relief. June bought one for me without asking. Eat, she said. You did a thing that eats energy. We stood on the courthouse steps like people who had climbed something and weren't ready to descend. Tasha handed me a copy of the Order Crisp official. The seal shone like a small sun cut in paper. I'll file the passport notice today, she said. The school and pediatrician will receive copies by the close of business. I'll e-file the neighbor statement and Maya's declaration once it's notarized. Expect some noise. Let it be noise. I will, I said. Thank you. Her mouth softened. You did this, she said. I just wrote it down nicely. Sarah looped her arm through mine. Lunch, she declared. I know a place that understands what to do with appetite and adrenaline. We walked away from the courthouse as a unit, not a parade, not a victory march, just a group of people who know what doors are for and how to exit them. The empanada was hot enough to sting, savory enough to anchor. I hadn't realized how hungry I was for things that were not arguments. At a red light, my phone buzzed. An email from Adam Order, taped by the mailboxes as building notice. No uninvited entry per court order. Pepper sniffed it and approved. Mrs. Patel says congrats. Another from Ms. Cole copy received. Filed. Noah says to tell you he got line leader for the field trip. He will not power trip. Much. Mr. Alvarez logged. Chart updated. Also, Noah chose ocean currents for his science project. I laughed and choked on air and joy at the same time, and Sarah thumped my back like a metronome. After lunch, we went home. Home. The word sat right on my tongue. I taped the order to the inside of the breaker box under Emily Windows. It felt subversive and correct. Then I slid a copy into the front sleeve of the binder. The plastic whispered in agreement. By 3, the apartment was sun-drenched. Lily lined up her stuffed animals for a court of her own, whispering order, order, and then giving everyone a cookie. Noah spread out index cards and drew arrows for wind and currents across a blue poster. He labeled one corner, legend red means leaving, yellow means choosing, blue means upstairs. He added a small star sticker next to blue and didn't explain it. He didn't need to. A knock sounded. Not the flat kind. A gentle tap. Mrs. Patel was at the door with a Tupperware of dal and a shy smile. My husband says, "Congratulations," she said. He reads filings like weather. Today's is fair. Thank you, I said, and meant food and safety and a hallway where knocks are soft. I texted Maya a single line. Order granted. Thank you for your courage. She replied with a heart, and then after a minute I told Matthew that rooms are for people, not titles. He asked if he could come draw at your table one day. I said we'd see if everyone behaved like adults. In the late afternoon, June and I walked to the corner to buy milk. We passed a window with a display of seashells arranged on driftwood. June pointed at a small spiral. That one's a whelk, she said. Did you know whelks are patient? They wear their house on their back without apology. I do now, I said. We bought the milk, and also because I could a cheap frame for my grandmother's letter. At home, I slid the letter inside and hung it in the hallway where the light lands in the morning. The sentence looked official under glass, like it had always been meant for paper with a mat. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote the day's entry. Order granted. I wrote the judge's words, not the whole speech, just the parts that matter when you wake at 3 a.m. and need to know how to stand. This is a practical order responding to a pattern that amounts to harassment. Boundaries are the first step. Your call. I let my pen slow on the last sentence until the ink deepened. When the kids returned from the playground, Lily presented me with a leaf she'd declared a trophy. For brave, she said. Noah asked if he could draw currents on the map that showed how storms circle and then pass. They don't stay, he said matter of fact. They visit and go. Exactly, I said. As evening slid in, Sarah pulled the lasagna back out. We added salad and dinner became a ceremony for ordinary ceremony. After I washed 2 plates and 2 small forks, while Lily stuck star stickers on the fridge in a constellation no astronomer would recognize, but any mother would home. My phone buzzed once more. An email from my parents' lawyer. Subject line receipt of order. Body. We acknowledge the court's decision. Future communication will be in writing. No apology. No war. Just the new weather report. Tasha sent a final text. Passport notice filed. School and medical copies delivered. Sleep. Tomorrow we can discuss next steps, re-beneficiary change log context only. For now, fence stands. I stepped onto the small balcony with a cup of tea. The courtyard glowed with the kind of light that forgives. Pepper patrolled the stair rail like a black comma punctuating the evening. Somewhere below, Mrs. Patel laughed at something her husband said in a language my body understood without translation relief. I thought of the courthouse pews, pencil marble, and the judge whose glasses made moons. I thought of my mother's pearls and my father's posture and the way the lawyer's tie had lost its argument. I thought of Maya's hand not shaking when she said temporary, and then said person, and meant a boy with a name. I thought of June lipstick and empanada, and ledger in a coffee tin courage. I thought of Sarah who labeled the breaker box like a map to the places we refused to go dark. I thought of my grandmother who wrote ocean and meant choice. And then I closed my eyes and listened to my children brush their teeth in a bathroom where the mirror reflects faces that do not have to make themselves small. Noah narrated the proper flossing technique with the seriousness of a ship captain. Lily sang to the mermaid light. When they climbed into bed, I sat at the threshold between rooms mine theirs and read the order out loud. Not the legalese, just the bones. No uninvited entry. No interference. In writing only. Lily raised her hand like a student. Does that mean Grandma and Grandpa can't just show up and say mean things? It means I said the rules are posted on the door. Noah nodded. Like the password, he said. Except for grown-ups. Exactly. I tucked them in with the quilt that has tide sewn into it. The window held the last blue. A siren far away sang briefly to someone else's story, and then went quiet. The apartment breathed. At my desk, I wrote one more thing in the binder in a tab I hadn't named yet. I called it After. And under it today, the court believed paper. The paper believed us first. We believed ourselves before that. That's the order. I turned off the lamp. The room kept a soft light, the kind that makes you think of lighthouses and not storms. I lay down and let sleep come without bargaining. The collapse did not sound like walls falling. It sounded like a gavel touching wood and a pen on a line, and the click of a latch on a door we did not open. In the morning, we would make lunches and find shoes and argue about how many chocolate chips count as breakfast math. We would tape the order to a private place in our minds and go on with living. When the mail came, there would be bills and a catalog that we don't know we're not buying, and maybe a postcard from a science museum because Noah requested one. We would keep the chain on. We would answer in writing. We would practice being a Welk patient, portable, unapologetically housed. And the window, my window, would keep being itself bigger than a rule, more honest than a letter. A square of proof. A soft, ordinary ocean. By the time the mail slot coughed up the thick cream-colored envelope, the kettle had just clicked itself quiet. I stood in our small kitchen, the one with a view of the maple that makes late afternoon light look like a promise. and waited for my hands to decide whether they would shake. They didn't. The return address was the downtown library, not a law firm, not the courthouse. Handwritten, not typed. Inside, folded on staff letterhead, and sealed with a piece of tape that had caught one stray cat hair. Pepper's calling card, apparently, was a note, Ms. Parker. Per your request, Study Room B is reserved for you on Saturday, from 10:30 a.m. The room is visible through glass for safety. Please let the front desk know when you arrive. Elaine reference desk. Underneath a smaller script added, good light in that room. North-facing. I poured the water and thought, this is how we will do it. In a room with glass. Daylight. No metaphors needed. A table, 2 chairs, a clock you can see, and a librarian who understands that clarity is a kind of kindness. I printed 1 page and wrote 3 headings in my neatest teacher print: ground rules, boundaries, next steps. Then I drew a small square in the corner and wrote 30 minutes inside it. Not for them, for me. When Saturday came, Sarah drove us. Not because I can't parallel park, I can, but because she has a talent for separating the station wagon from the event. In the back seat, the binder lay buckled in like a third child, the order clipped to the front sleeve. I placed an hourglass in the tote bag, 5 minutes of sand small enough to look like an object, not a prop. It used to sit on my desk when students practiced reading aloud. You have a turn. You don't take the whole room. Power can be practiced without pretending. Do you want me to come in? She asked as we idled in the drop-off lane. No, I said. I want you close. She nodded. I'll be at the cafe across the lobby. I'll drink something overpriced and watch a cat video in case we need to balance the universe. Upstairs, Elaine handed me a keycard, touched her alto pin like a secret sign, and tilted her head towards Study Room B. The glass was clear. The table was clean wood. The chairs rolled, but not too much. Someone had set the thermostat to sweater weather, which keeps conversations efficient. Good. I put the hourglass on the table, slid my page under it, and breathed the particular kind of quiet libraries are built to keep. Then I saw them in the reflection, my parents moving through the stacks like people who don't know where history is shelved. My father in his "we pay property taxes" stance. My mother in linen that made no sound. Brian was not with them, and the absence steadied me. They did not knock. Elaine's hand lifted discreetly from the desk. My father, chastened by public spaces, pressed the handle and stepped in. My mother followed Pearl's posture, a canvas tote monogrammed like a brand. Emily, she said, bright in that careful way. How official. Yes, I said. Please sit. They sat like compliance was a concession, not a requirement. I placed my hand on the page and my voice came out as the person I now choose to be. 30 minutes, I said, tapping the square. 10 for you, 10 for me, 10 for decisions. We keep our voices low. We keep our bodies on our sides of the table. We discuss only the present and what is verifiable. We do not relitigate the past. My mother blinked. Relitigate. Who taught you that vocabulary? Life, I said. And my librarian. She half laughed, half scoffed, and then, because rules are sacrament in rooms with glass, nodded. My father adjusted his cuffs. The clock on the wall clicked twice. I flipped the hourglass and looked at them as if I were a judge, and they were my difficult students, which is to say, not enemies, not friends, and not the center of the story. My mother began. She chose apologetic and landed on performative. We made errors in judgment, she said, voice soft enough to try to pass the microphone. We didn't intend to cause harm. The house adjustment was, perhaps, abrupt. I raised an eyebrow. She recalibrated. It was wrong, she said, the words sticking in her mouth like a seed husk. I am sorry. She swallowed. We are sorry. My father stared at the hourglass like it had personally offended him, and then turned his gaze to me. We love the children, he said with a finality that tried to choke off space. We want to see them. We want to be part of their lives. This legal Boundary, he said the word like it had thorns, is excessive. I did not rescue him from his adjectives. I let the sand fall. We brought something my mother said and reached into the tote. Elaine at the desk beyond the glass lifted one finger, not quite a warning, more like a reminder that public spaces have public rules. My mother withdrew a white envelope and placed it on the table without pushing it toward me. It's for the children, she said. A contribution, college, or rooms, whatever you see fit. I didn't touch it. Is it conditional? I asked. Silence. Then too quickly, no. My father sighed. Emily. He said my name the way farmers say weather. We are trying. The sand thinned. I flipped the glass. My turn. Here is what will happen, I said, and put my finger on the boundaries heading. You will write to the P.O. box if you wish to contact us. You will not arrive at our home or the children's school. You will not contact their doctors, their teachers, or any agency in their names. You will write. I will respond when responding serves the children. My mother opened her mouth. I lifted my hand. She closed it. In 3 months, I continued if there has been compliance, and if the children wish, we may consider a short supervised visit in a public place. There will be no talk of legacy, no comparisons, no commentary on rooms. You will not speak ill of me to my children. If any of those lines are crossed, visits end. This is not punishment. This is protection. My father leaned forward an inch. Elaine cleared her throat at the desk. He sat back a millimeter. This is outrageous, he said softly, angry. You're dictating. I'm parenting, I said, and negotiating terms of access to my children. He looked at the envelope like it might save him. We can be generous, he said, if you meet us halfway. Money is welcome if it comes without strings, I said, not unkindly. Gifts are welcome if they are not instruments. You can contribute to a 529 that I control. You can give to their school library in their honor. You can donate to the science museum Noah loves, to the shelter where Lily wants to read to cats. You cannot buy terms. My mother stared at the hourglass like she wanted to count backward. We are your parents, she said finally, as if the title were a key. We did our best. You did your best with the tools you chose, I said. I am choosing new ones. The sand fell. I turned to next steps and clicked my pen. I will send you a list of acceptable topics for letters, I said. No advice disguised as concern. No mythologizing of the past. Tell them stories about your childhood that do not require a villain. Send recipes. Send facts about birds. Birds. My father echoed, perplexed. Noah likes migration, I said. Lily likes wings. My mother exhaled hard enough to fog the glass. She put her hand on the envelope as if feeling its pulse, then pushed it an inch toward me and pulled it back a half inch, a choreography of control and concession. You always were. Stubborn, she said, and I recognized the insult she meant, and the compliment she didn't. I took the envelope, slid it into my tote without looking inside, and said, Thank you. Not for the money. For the data point. We had 7 minutes left. The room held its breath. My mother glanced at the clock and then at my face, and something like recognition flickered. No approval. Recognition, the way you look at a person you birthed and realize you didn't make their spine. What else, I asked, in the time we have? She swallowed. Do they sleep upstairs? The question came out small and accidental, and for one crazy second I almost softened. Yes, I said simply. With light. She nodded once, quick, almost like a tick, then shook herself back into the theorem. Will. Right, she said. We will. Consider your terms. You will follow them, I said. Consideration is not a step. The minute hand clicked. We stood because the room told us to. My father reached into his jacket, pulled out a key I hadn't seen in years, brass familiar, the one to the house on the hill. He set it on the table the way men put down cards when they're stalling. I have my keys, I said. He nodded. then looked past me at the glass in the hall and the librarian with her alto pin and the hourglass lying arrogantly on its side. You always liked rules. I learned to survive under bad ones, I said. Now I make better ones. We stepped into the hall. Elaine looked up, met my eyes, and did not ask. Return the keycard at the desk, she said to all of us, neutral, precise. Study rooms C and D are open if you need time to collect yourselves. It was both instruction and blessing. My parents walked away together, their shoulders square. My mother did not look back. My father did briefly, and his face, a configuration I had not seen, looked not at me, but at the little hourglass in my hand, like time had learned to take the shape of something he didn't own. In the cafe, Sarah slid me a cappuccino with a heart in the foam that was either a coincidence or the barista's quiet dissent. How was the glass room, she asked. Like weather, I said. Predictable enough to dress for, unpredictable enough to carry an umbrella. And the envelope strings cut, I said. If there were any. We drove home the long way past the river because Noah likes bridges, and Lily counts boats out loud like spells. At a red light, I texted Tasha, library meeting done. Boundaries stated. Envelope offered unconditional per their words, but we'll treat it as context. Expect letters. She responded with a sentence that felt like a hand on my shoulder. I'll draft an acceptance statement for any funds, gift without condition for children's benefit, signed by you alone. At home, we spent the afternoon doing domestic things, with the reverence of people who know the other version. I cleaned the oven until it looked like potential. Lily stuck star stickers on the breaker box next to Emily windows and declared it the galaxy of power. Noah measured the wall again, adjusted his shelf plan by 1/2 inch, and announced optimization. We said it together because some words are fun when they fit. A week passed, then 2. Letters arrived, tentative, awkward, as if language had sprouted bruises. My mother sent a recipe for the lemon bars she used to make when company came, and we were told to smile. She wrote about a robin that had built a nest under their eaves and how the chicks stretched their mouths open like requests. She did not mention legacy. She did not mention rooms. It sounded like a woman running her fingers along a wall she didn't realize was load-bearing. My father's letter was 2 paragraphs and a P.S. The paragraphs explained nothing and apologized to no one. The P.S. read, "Your grandmother used to hum when she made tea. I hear it sometimes. Thought you should know." It landed like a pebble in water, a small disturbance, an honest ring. The envelope had a cashier's check. No memo line. I took it to the credit union, opened 2 529s, and signed a loan. The teller asked, "Any co-owners?" and I said no with the clarity of a bell. We settled. Not into complacency, into routines that don't require you to check the peephole. Noah built his science fair board with an elegance that made Mr. Alvarez mutter, "Graduate school poster energy." He titled it, "Currents and Choices," because he's already shameless about the theme. Lily practiced reading aloud to Pepper in the courtyard, while Mrs. Patel timed her with a kitchen timer, because libraries aren't the only buildings with glass rooms. At the fair, parents wandered in arcs that mimicked language. My parents did not come. They did not email the principal. They mailed a postcard 2 days later, a photograph of a lighthouse with a scribble on the back. "We hope it went well." There were no instructions. The stamp carried more authority than the sentences. One evening after we finished dinner and I washed 2 plates and 2 small forks, the doorbell rang in a pattern I knew Adam when not urgent. I opened it to find him holding a box with found items scribbled across the top. "Storage clean out upstairs," he said. "And these had your name." He grinned. Pepper inspected for contraband. Inside a stack of old photographs I hadn't seen in years. A tape measure I had bought with my first paycheck and lost under a couch in my 20s, and a cassette tape labeled in my grandmother's hand, "Hums." I borrowed a neighbor's ancient tape deck and pressed play. The room filled with the soft edges of someone humming, no words, just the map of a melody you can walk with your eyes closed. I sat on the floor and let it rub the corners of the day smooth. Noah lay on his back and traced the air with his finger like a conductor. Lily curled up with her ear near the speaker like a small animal at a creek. I wrote my parents a note that night, short. We received your check. It was deposited into 2 education accounts in Noah and Lily's names. Thank you. We will consider a short visit to the park next month. Ground rules attached. If you agree, sign and return. If not, we will revisit in 3 months. They signed. No comments in the margins. Just signatures that looked like people trying to write without shaking. The day we met at the park, I set the rules like I set tables, simply carefully with room for plates. Public place. Sarah is on a bench in sunglasses like an ordinary spy. June is under a tree pretending to do a crossword and measuring decibel levels with her ear. 40 minutes. We arrived first because I wanted my children to step into a space that felt like ours. My parents came in together. My mother carried a paper bag from the bakery that doesn't use frosting like a weapon. My father carried nothing but his back and his face. Noah ran to the swings because momentum helps him think. Lily stood with one foot on the grass and one on the path like a diplomat at a border. No scripts were exchanged. There were no apologies. There were sentences with verbs. You've grown. I saw your project on the school website. I planted peonies this year. Pepper caught a moth. They did not say legacy. They did not say rooms. My mother took a breath to say something sharp twice and turned it into a swallow both times. My father laughed at a story about Lily's mispronunciation of spaghetti without making it a moral. The timer on my phone trilled politely at 38 minutes. I added 2 because they were behaving, and because grace is a currency I control now. When we left, my mother did not ask, "When is the next time?" My father did not say, "This is ridiculous." They said thank you like people who knew that those 2 words were a door we might be willing to open again. I filed the visit in the binder under experiments. The page read, Park. 40 minutes. No violations. Kids neutral to happy. Follow-up optional. I wrote optional in blue. Blue means upstairs in Noah's code. Weeks slipped past without incident. The order sat taped inside the breaker box next to star stickers that had begun to peel at the corners and curl like commas. The calm was not the old kind, the kind you buy by swallowing. It was the earned kind, the kind you build by naming things and putting them away. And then the twist, not a betrayal this time, not a blow. A letter arrived from a law firm I didn't recognize. My stomach did not drop. It frowned. I opened it at the table with a glass of water and a pencil so I could mark the margins. Ms. Parker. Our office represents the estate of Ruth Eleanor Parker, your grandmother. A sealed letter was discovered among documents relating to her life insurance policy and is addressed to you. It appears our late colleague neglected to forward it. Enclosed is the letter and a modest disbursement $2,500 from an ancillary policy you were not previously notified of. Our apologies for the delay. There was a check. There was also an envelope that had aged at the edges like a leaf. Inside, in the looping script, I could now identify by breath alone. Emily. If this finds you after I am gone, it only means one thing. Paper is slower than intention. Take this small tide and use it to pay the first month of any place that lets you stand up straight. Buy a desk. Buy a bowl for keys so you never forget you can come and go. If anyone tells you, the ocean belongs to the boys, take off your shoes. Walk in anyway. Grandma, I read it twice, then 3 times until the ink felt like a hand on my head. The check wasn't life-changing. It didn't need to be. It was a sentence with money attached, and sentences in the right hands move houses. That weekend, I let myself do something I hadn't. I bought a desk. Good wood. Simple lines. I placed it by the window. I put a blue bowl beside it and dropped my keys in with the ceremony of a person christening a boat. That night while the kids slept, I wrote. I wrote letters to future us the year Lily learns to ride a bike, the year Noah thinks he is bad at a thing, and is wrong the year I decide to forgive without forgetting. I wrote to the woman I had been the one who stayed in rooms that made her small, because they had her name on the mailbox. I wrote to the woman I am the one with a binder, a plant that lives for light, and a breaker box labeled like a poem. I wrote to my parents not to send, but to say plainly, this is what I needed. This is what you didn't give. This is what I gave myself. I shredded the House Rules newsletter I'd tucked into a sleeve months back and composted it under the tomato plant on the balcony. It felt theatrical to even think of burning, and we had enough metaphors. The tomato didn't need the past to grow. It needed soil and water and a person who remembers to look. Some nights I put on my grandmother's cassette and let the apartment fill with hum. On those nights, the binder didn't look like a weapon. It looked like a book. On those nights, the order inside the breaker box felt less like a fence and more like the outline of a garden. Near the end of the year, the court sent a notice, review hearing scheduled. Tasha asked if I wanted to extend. I read the calendar and then looked at my children at their unstartled faces and said, let's see how they behave. We prepared, because preparation is not paranoia, and went. In the hallway outside the same courtroom, the same bench, the same water fountain, we stood with less weight. My parents came. They looked smaller, not diminished, human-sized. The judge asked for incidents. Tasha reported none. The judge asked for our position. Tasha spoke. But I answered the question I wish someone had asked me years ago. What will you do with peace? We want the order to convert into a mutual understanding, I said. We will keep communication in writing. We will set visits on our terms. We will not carry hostility forward. We will carry the rules. The judge looked pleased in the way a person does when a theory holds. Mutual understanding is not enforceable, she said, but her voice had a smile in it. She let the order lapse with a warning shot of language my father would remember. Any new pattern of harassment will be met with the old remedy, she said. Do not test it. We walked out without fanfare. On the steps, my mother put on sunglasses, though it wasn't bright, and said, we'll write. My father nodded. You've done well. It sounded like surrender, not sarcasm. Brian wasn't there. I didn't ask. On the drive home, Sarah took a route that went by the river, because we are allowed to be our clichés. Noah quizzed me on ocean facts and corrected 3 of mine gently. Lily asked if we could get a second cat and name her Window. I didn't say no. When we got back, Pepper lay on the stair rail like punctuation. He blinked as if to say the sentence was good. Inside, the apartment smelled like lemons and pencil shavings in a way that didn't pretend neutrality. It smelled like a room where people work and are happy about it. I took the order down from the breaker box and placed it in the back of the binder in the tab called After, behind the letter from the judge and the check stub I kept from the deposit to the kids' accounts and the photocopy of the librarian's reservation slip. I slid in my grandmother's second letter, the one about the bowl in the ocean. I closed the cover gently like a book at story time. That evening, we had a small thing that felt large, a housewarming we hadn't had the bandwidth to attempt before. June brought lemonade in a pitcher that had seen arguments and reconciliations. Miss Cole delivered a stack of library books with due dates arranged like a game. Mr. Alvarez texted a picture of a coastal storm to Noah with the caption, "Currents at work." Adam carried the folding chairs up with Pepper supervising. Mrs. Patel taught Lily to fold napkins into boats. Sarah hung paper stars from the doorway like our ceiling was a safe sky. I stood by the window and watched people step carefully over the threshold, as if they knew all thresholds are sacred if you decide they are. I listened to the sound of forks on plates and the particular murmurs humans make when they are unafraid. I put my hand flat on the wall, felt the hum of electricity that runs through a place that knows it is shelter. At some point, Aunt June found me. She tucked a strand of hair behind my ear the way she does and said, "Your grandmother would have sat in that chair and claimed it was hers. Then she would have handed it to you." She looked toward the breaker box and laughed. "You labeled your light." "Someone had to," I said. We went out onto the balcony when the sun decided to pour itself out. The city made its small, competent noises. Pepper stalked a moth and then magnanimously let it go. Down on the sidewalk, a kid chalked a square that looked like a window and wrote in shaky letters, "Look," with an arrow pointing inside his drawing. When the sky turned that particular blue that makes edges honest, I took the envelope my parents had given me at the library from the back of a drawer. I opened it finally because I believed my own rules and also believed that sometimes looking is what frees you. Inside was a check and a note with no flourish for Noah and Lily. Use it as you see fit. We will write. No strings in ink. Plenty in history. I chose my scissors. I cut the note in half, not to destroy it, to separate the sentences. I kept the first in the binder next to my grandmother's letter. I recycled the second because commitment is renewable if it is earned. Then I wrote a letter I sent. We opened 2 accounts. Thank you for the contribution. The rules stand. We will write back when writing benefits the children. Our address is the same. It is upstairs. After everyone left after the lemonade was drunk, and the chairs were folded, and Mrs. Patel's boats had sunk gracefully into the dishwasher, I tucked Noah and Lily into their beds. Noah asked me to check the currents again. Lily made me promise we'd get a second cat, at least pretend, in a story. I promised to consider which is how adults tell the truth kindly. At my desk, I wrote the last line of a thing I didn't know I was writing all year. I built a life upstairs. Then I turned off the lamp and stood in the doorway long enough to be certain that the dark was friendly. I will not pretend there were no more knocks. There were. Some were soft. Some were stern. Some were wind. Some were Pepper launching himself at nothing. But the chain stayed on when it should. The door opened when it could. The rules were on paper and the breaker box and in my mouth. And the twist that still surprises me even now, even after the study room and the park and the courthouse and the cassette of hums, is this. The revenge I thought I wanted was only ever a boundary drawn clean. It felt in my body less like winning and more like a lining, not a roar, a click. When I remember the basement now, I don't taste metal. I see hands carrying boxes up a flight of stairs into a room with light. I see a boy labeling a map, and a girl sticking stars where she wants, and a woman with a binder and a bowl for keys. I see a window that is not a metaphor. I see a cat who approves of paper. I see a breaker box with Emily windows written in block letters that make a life. If anyone tells you to get smaller to fit a room, you can quote me. Find a room with bigger windows or build one. You can do it under glass in a library. You can do it in a courtroom that smells like pencils. You can do it in a kitchen with a plant leaning toward the north. You can do it in the time it takes an hourglass to empty, and then you can flip it and go on. I am not the ocean. I am a person who learned to stand in it without backing up. My children will not inherit silence. They will inherit a map with colors labeled red means leaving, yellow means choosing, and blue means upstairs. They will add their legend someday. Perhaps they'll add green means gardens, or purple means cats, or gold means windows. I hope they do. For now, the window is open and the room holds. The light does what light does. And I, without permission, without apology, live here. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the left.